alta, alta es la luna cuando empieza a esclarecer. Y yo hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Y yo hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Mis ojos se hincharon de tanto mirar la mar. Vapóricos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay. Vapóricos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay. Es hermoso, dos taras tiene con él, la una que arrollada dos, la otra que echa sheshbesh. La una que arrollada dos, la otra que echa sheshbesh. Mi querido es alto y vano y una vara de expander. Mi madre hizo colada, lo metió a detener. Mi madre hizo colada, lo metió a detener. Na, 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 na,
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. Say that for afterwards. And I am your host, Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. And we are going to be studying some Torah. So last time we started by reading through the Torah portion. I'm going to do that again. I think it's a great way to kind of get into it, and then we'll go back and discuss various issues that come up. So that being said, let me bring up the Torah portion. And we are in Genesis chapter 28, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Chapter 28:10 is where we're starting. And let me just share the screen. Stop screen, share screen. I'm going to do an entire window. And I'm sharing this window right here. And that should do it. So, I have a fly problem today, as you may have remembered from before. So I might be killing flies in the middle of this study. Okay. Alrighty. So let's start. I assume you can all see. Yep. I believe you can all see the screen. Let's bring this over to the Hebrew. This is a great site, by the way, BibleHub.com. If you guys don't know about it, it's the site I always use. Yes, it has Christian stuff on it, but you know what? I find it very interesting and entertaining sometimes to study the Christian stuff as well. It certainly gives context to the the Tanakh, at least gives interesting insight into the Tanakh, seeing it from a different point of view. I have certainly, as I point out every time I mention Christianity, so there are no understandings, especially since, well, we'll just leave it at that. So, but I am in no way, shape, or form a Christian. Never have been, never will be. I do not believe that Jesus, Yeshua, whatever you want to call him, was Messiah, is Messiah, or will be Messiah. I have absolutely nothing to do with Christianity. I don't want anything to do with Christianity. The closest I will ever come to it is saying that, yes, as an historical figure and as a human being, I find some of I find that I agree with some, maybe even a lot of this Yeshua Hanotzri's teachings. It's very Karaite-like. It's very antinomial, right? Is the word antinomial? Antinomial. No. No. Antinomian. Antinomian. Not antinomial. Antinomian. I don't know. Any rate, it's not legalistic. It's not unnecessarily an overly legalistic. Okay, antinomianism, I believe it is. Anywho, but that's about as far as it goes. Here, apologize. Oh, 1 second. Sorry. Okay, I just had to write something very quickly. So, but no, I do not believe that Jesus or Yeshua will arise from the dead and become king over Israel. I certainly don't believe it. I don't think that any person who is dead, be it Jesus or Menachem Mendel Schneerson or even King David himself, will arise to be a future Messiah over Israel. I think everyone pretty much gets one time around, one chance to grab the golden ring, and they do what they can with it. Anywho, because my proof would be that if people who were resurrected from the dead Messiah over Israel, then we wouldn't have of a David, or the Davidic dynasty being restored to its former glory, and the descendants of David sitting on the throne. Just David could arise and he could become the Messiah. What do we need Jesus for? We've got David himself. That's the Davidic dynasty, is David, right? He was the greatest. Okay, Christians would argue that Jesus was greater than David, but there's no reason that I would say that if a dead man, formerly dead, now resurrected man, can become leader of Israel, then it would be David, and that doesn't make any sense to me, and it doesn't have any indication whatsoever in the Tanakh. Some other Karaites, who shall remain nameless, seem to imply that they think that it's a possibility. Let's get rid of that. That Jesus or someone named Yeshua could become future king over Israel. I find that to be a very, very, very problematic statement. Of course, it's potentially cryptic. Certainly, it feeds into the idea that person believes that a resurrected, maybe he's not talking about the same Yeshua, but you know what? If he doesn't make that clear, then he probably is. So that person thinks that Jesus could rise from the dead and become future Messiah over Israel. I find that to be extremely, extremely disturbing and problematic point of view for a Karaite. And I certainly am not of that view whatsoever. Okay, enough about my views on Christianity. We're now going to start in Genesis 28:10. I'll go back a little bit. I'll start in Genesis 28:1, just as we did this morning, just to get a bit more context, and then we'll continue on to the end of the parasha. So let me bring this up again. Share. Oh, I see. I got it right there. Okay, that should work. So, starting in Genesis chapter 28, verse 1, we have Vayikra Yitzchak el Yaakov. ויברך אותו ויצווהו ויאמר לו לא תיקח אישה מבנות כנען. Same instruction that Abraham gave regarding his son Isaac, right? There's a lot of, maybe now I'll comment a little bit more as we go through this morning. I didn't stop at all to comment, but we know that Abraham commanded his servant, which we can assume, I believe, was Eliezer, even though it doesn't mention his name explicitly, Eliezer of Damascus, that he commanded his servant to, hold on, I might have to kill a fly here. Missed a little bastard. He commanded his servant to go back to Haran, to where his family was. Okay, remember, as we said last time, Terach had brought the family from Ur Kasdim and intended to go to Canaan. We see this in Genesis 11, and instead he stopped in Haran, which we've now explored, and it seems to be in southern Turkey, near the southeastern Turkey, near the Syrian border, part of a region called Padan Aram, which in turn was part of the Aramean kingdom, also known as Aram Naharaim, Aram of the two rivers being the Tigris and the Euphrates. At any rate, so we see that Abraham instructs his servant to go back there to Haran to find a wife for Yitzchak. The same lie between Abraham's situation and Yitzchak's situation. Another example that we spoke about last week was the fact that Abraham had to lie to Avimelech, the king of Gerar, and say that his wife Sarah was his sister. And then Yitzchak also lied to this same Avimelech. At least we can probably assume that it's the same Avimelech, saying exactly the same thing, that his wife Rivka was his sister. So there's a lot of replay. Both patriarchs did not want their children to take the women of the land, the Canaanite women. We see in the case of Yitzchak that his son Esav took the Canaanite women as wives, and this created a big problem, right? So, and that's that was a problem. And then I believe it also says about Ishmael, right? Doesn't it say that he took? Maybe not. Let's see. No, I'm not going to look it up now. Okay, so here we are. Verse 2. Kum lech paden aram Betuel avi mecha. So who is Betuel? Betuel is Lot's father. Isn't that right? Unless I'm having... One second. No, I'm sorry. It was Betuel's father. I was Rivka's father. Lot's father was Haran, I believe, with a hey, not with a chet. Yeah. So Betuel was Rivka's father. And we went through all the genealogy or the lineage last time. Abraham married his half-sister. Yitzchak married his first cousin. And Yaakov married his second cousins. Yosef did not marry his third cousin. But it's an interesting pattern, right? Abraham marries his sister. Okay, that's the same shared father. Okay, remember they had the same father, but did not have the same mother. Okay, that's what That's exactly what Avraham says to Avimelech, the king of Gerar. He says, she really is my sister. We have the same father, but we don't have the same mother. So Avraham married his sister. Yitzchak married his first cousin, because Yitzchak's father is Avraham. Avraham's father is Terach. Terach's son is Bituel, as we see here, and Bituel's daughter is Rivka. Okay? And Yaakov marries his second cousins. So we know the lineage up back to Terach, and then we go back down from Terach to Bituel again. Bituel's Bituel's children are Lavan and Rivka. Lavan's daughters are Rachel and Leah. So that's second cousins. This is a very interesting pattern, right? It's almost like a pyramid, right? You can see my face here. It's almost like a pyramid, right? Avraham, Sarah. Then we go down the pyramid a little bit, and then we have first cousins. So we have brother and sister, or we have the parents, right? The parent is Terach. And then we go down one, and we have Avraham and Sarah, their brother and sister. We go down to the next generation. We have first cousins, Yitzhak and Rivka. We go down to the next generation. We have second cousins. And that would be Yaakov and Leah and Rachel. See all these interesting patterns in the Torah. Sometimes it makes us question the truth of the Torah, I must honestly say. So, because sometimes the patterns seem just a little bit too coincidental. And I would be a liar if I didn't say that there were times where I had serious questions about the authenticity of the Torah. And for years, I've gone through this kind of struggle, how much of it is true, how much of it is analogy, how much is legend. In the end, I decided that I do believe it's the word of God. I do believe it's divine, and I do believe it's basically all true. But I would be lying if I said I didn't have my serious questions at times. Okay, anyway. So, as I mentioned, it's a fly situation here. There's a couple of flies zipping around, and they're very aggressive. So I may have every so often, they have these little things that look like spasms. I'm actually just trying to kill a fly. Okay, so yeah. So where were we? Verse 2? No, we just read verse 2. Avi imecha v'kach lecha misham isha mivnot Lavan achi imecha. Okay. Verse 3, the El Shaddai. Notice that Yitzchak says El Shaddai and does not say Yehovah. They do not yet know the name of Yehovah. Yevarech otcha. And in fact, when it speaks about in Exodus chapter 9, verse 33, is it, or something like that? Says you did not, when the name of God is revealed to Moses, he said, your fathers did not know me as Yehovah, they knew me as El Shaddai, right? So that was the main name for God back then. El Shaddai Yevarech otcha v'yifracha v'yirbecha v'hayit lekahal amin. And El Shaddai, usually that's translated as the powerful God. El is just a God in general, as is an Elohim. Shaddai is usually understood as powerful. Translated here as Almighty. Almighty, BDB, etymology dubious, etc. Can you take this, please? Well, take this. Okay. I'm doing the study now, please. All right. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing here, but we'll assume it means powerful or strong, almighty. But El Shaddai Yevarech otcha shall bless you. Yafrecha v'yarbecha v'hayite lekahal amin. And you shall be literally to a, how do you translate kahal into English? Kahal is, hold on one second. Excuse me, I'm doing the study right now, okay? And if you stand there, you're bothering me, okay? Yeah, very quickly, and then please let me do the study, all right? Okay, and then just, I'm sorry, I'll be back in 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Just want to clear out the commotion. Actually, let me. Okay, so where were we? So the El Shaddai Yivarechot. I'm sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. So, El Shaddai Yivarechotcha v'yifrecha v'yarbecha v'ayita lekahal amim. So kahal is congregation. Hold on a second. Got it. I'm really sorry. There's a lot of distractions here. Okay. So kahal is translated as congregation, right? Usually. How do they translate it? Assembly. Assembly of peoples. So, and this is a blessing that is being given to Yitzchak. Wait a second. V'kra Yitzchak Yaakov. וירף אותו ויצווה ויאמר תיקח ממנו El Shaddai. I'm sorry, this is Yitzchak blessing Yaakov. El Shaddai yivarech otcha. El Shaddai will bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, right? Be fruitful and multiply. Remember that from somewhere? And you shall become an assembly of peoples. Okay? So this is a blessing being given to Yaakov. So who is the assembly of people he becomes? It's clearly speaking about the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? The kahal, an assembly or coming together, or a group of peoples. So it's interesting that kahal amim, right? Amim is peoples, and each of was clearly from the context, since this blessing is being given to Yaakov, we're talking about the tribes, right? Because Yaakov only had 12 male children. He didn't have any others in all the tribes of Israel, that each one is considered an is considered a people. Okay. Verse 4. Vayiten lecha et birkat Avraham lecha ulezarecha itcha itach lerish lecha et eretz migurecha asher natan Elohim laAvraham. See if there's anything I want to say here. Iten lecha et birkat Avraham lecha ulezarecha, to your seed. Again, I pointed this out a number of times. That I have a very good friend who basically identifies as Karaite. He's a very kind of private person. But he points out that whenever the Torah uses the word seed, it's talking about the patrilineal descendants, the male line descendants. Okay, zera, another word for, or another use of the word zera. Well, zera in its most basic form means seed, like the kind you would plant in the ground. But zera also means sperm. Okay, and so when it says zeracha, it's very specifically speaking about the male line. Okay, because it's talking about the sperm, right? The from generation to generation. Okay, so keep that in mind when you see the word zera. Okay, it's not talking about the female line; it's talking about the male line. Okay, we also know that, well, no, I won't. No, that point doesn't work here. Okay, itach lerishtecha et eretz migurecha, to inherit the land of your sojourning, asher natan Elohim laAvraham, which Elohim Natan, which Elohim gave to Abraham. Well, Elohim did not yet give the land of Israel to Abraham. So what does this mean? Well, this now explains how Hebrew works. See, a lot of people make mistakes when they try to overlay English, or shall we say modern language, Germanic slash Greek slash Romantic, Roman, Latin derived languages into ancient Hebrew. Okay, so he didn't give, but he promised that he was going to give. So really, a better translation here would be "Et eretz migurecha asher natan Elohim laAvraham." So, which he you could say gave in the sense that he promised it to him, right? He didn't physically give it to him, but he gave it to him through a promise, right? He bequeathed it to him, or he promised that he would have it one day. Okay, it would be like saying, okay, you see that house over there? I'm gonna buy it when it goes up for sale, and I'm gonna give it to you. Okay, and then I could say, well, I've given you the house, even though I didn't physically give you the house. It means that I've given you the house in theory. Okay, and that's really what it's saying here. Okay, so yes, God did not yet physically give the land of Israel to Abraham, but he will. He promised him that his descendants will have it one day. All right, verse 5. Again, as we spoke earlier today, Haran is the city, Padan Aram is the region in which the city Haran lies, and Aram Naharaim is the Aramean kingdom in which the region Padan Aram arrives. So that's why there's a lot of confusion. You'll see these three different appellations for where Abraham or Terach took his family when they left Ur Kasdim. Okay, and they're all basically interchangeable. One is the city, one is the state, and one is the country. That's the way I always like to use the analogy. Haran is the city, Padan Aram is the state or the region, and Aram Naharaim is the country, is the kingdom. Okay, El Lavan ben Betuel Ha'arami, Achi Rivka, Em Yaakov Esav. Okay. Yar Esav. Just want to make sure there's no one waiting to come in. Let me get rid of this. Nobody can hear what you're saying. If you want to come over here and say something, then come over here and say something. Okay, but you can't. I can't repeat it. Okay, because it's too complicated. You want to say something? Come. You don't have to put even your face on the screen. You can just talk over here and talk into the microphone. Come. Okay. If not, I'm going to go on. So, Esav marries Mahalat. Yar Esav ki berach Yitzhak et Yaakov. Right, we know that already. Washilach oto padena Aram lakachat lo misham ishar bibracho oto v'yatzav alav lemor lo tikach isha mivnot Kinaan. V'shma Yaakov el aviv el imo v'yelech padena Aram. Verse 8. V'yar Esav ki raot benot Kinaan be'enei Yitzchak aviv. So Esav had previously married the daughters of two Canaanite wives. I believe it was two. Okay. And was really upsetting his parents. They did not want, right? They did not want, it's very clear that Abraham, as we said, and Yitzhak did not want their children to marry the local girls, right? The local girls were trouble. In fact, later on, the Israelites are prohibited from intermarrying with the Canaanite women. Which is kind of interesting because we are commanded to wipe out all the Canaanites, men, women, children, everything, right? Every last thing of the Canaanites. But yet there's a mitzvah in the Torah not to marry the Canaanite women. Well, it seems that the Torah understood that maybe we weren't going to wipe them all out. So we can't intermarry with them. Of course, there's Ezra chapter 10, verse 8, which speaks about sending away the Canaanite or the local women, the women of the land, along with their children. This is a big verse that's often spoken about in Karaite terms. I'm not going to get into it right now, It's usually used as a polemic against the idea of matrilineal descent. However, the picture is a lot more complicated than that. But I'm not going to get into it now. Okay, verse 9. Vayelech Esav el Yishmael. So Esav goes to, well, let's see. Esav's father is Yitzchak. Yitzchak's half brother is Yishmael. And so Vikach et Machalat bat Yishmael ben Avraham Achot Nivayot al Nashav lo leisha. So he now Yishmael takes his first. I'm sorry, not Ishmael. Esav takes his first cousin, right? So daddy Yitzchak, uncle Yishmael, and cousin Machalat. So they have the same grandfather in common, which would be Abraham, right? Common grandfather means first cousin. Okay, so we got a lot of incest going on. You know the old joke, incest, the game the whole family can play. All right, horrible joke. Sorry. So, but it's not technically incest according to the Torah, right? First cousins are not prohibited by the Torah. So, okay, Machalat bat Yishmael ben Avraham achot nivayot al nashav lo leisha. Nivayot. So, no, I'm not talking about the half siblings. The half siblings, I'm talking about first cousins and beyond are not prohibited. Well, again, this is before the Torah was given. All right, let me, and also 2 wives are prohibited later in the Torah, and very much based on what happens, right? Well, not sister wives doesn't apply 2 wives who are sisters. Sister wives is usually used in the polygamy community to mean 2 wives who are like sisters, who become like sisters. Okay, so where were we? So just a note, whoever Facebook user is, okay, if you're typing in on Facebook, I cannot see who you are. So if you want me to know who you are, then put your name first. So for instance, okay, I'll give you an example. Let's say I was saying, Melech, this is my comment. Because I'm not looking in on Facebook right now, and the streaming service that I'm looking in on doesn't, from Facebook, and I also believe from YouTube, it's probably best in general just to put your name before if you want me to know who you are. So someone says not racist, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Can you tell I'm listening to you now here on Facebook? Somebody says, I don't know who you are. So, but there is somebody listening on Facebook. So, but if you want me to know who you are, do like I did in this comment. I'll just show the comment. Oh, I didn't show the comment. Let me show it. Okay, so that's how you should write your comments, because it's a limitation in the streaming service here that it will not show me your name. If you are directly in the streaming service, in other words, in the StreamYard, it will show me your name. If you're coming in from Facebook or YouTube, it won't show me your name. So then you have to type in your name for me if you want me to know who you are. Okay, let's get rid of that. So, okay, verse 10, Vayetzei Yaakov Beersheva, Harana. So Yaakov left Beersheva and went to Haran. We spoke about this earlier. So it's basically a journey northeast. And let's see. I don't read this. Oops. So Haran. As we said before, is right there. So, okay, Haran is there. And Israel would be down around there. So it's a northeast journey of quite a distance. ויפגע במקום וילן שם כי בא השמש. And he came to a place, or literally bumped into a place. Okay, nudged the place, I guess you could say. That this word livgoa is often used as to get the attention of, or to nudge, or to bump into. במקום וילן שם כי בא השמש. And he slept there because the sun had gone down. And last time, in the end of the last study, this morning's study, we spoke about how there definitely could be evidence that this place that we're speaking about is the Temple Mount. And I'm not going to go through it again because we spent about, I would say, 20 minutes to half an hour on it last time. So we're not going to go through it again, but I will point out some verses as we come by them, as we go by them. And he took some of the stones, literally of the stones of the place, and he put them me rashotav, and he put them literally around his heads. I don't know why it says rashotav rather than me rosho. Oops. And I'd like to find out. Let's see what my boy Robert Abrams says. Hello. There we go. So in Genesis 28. Any comments on this? What's going on here? It's stuck. Let me try to refresh it. Problem with the internet? No, it's coming. Okay. 131. I'm quite confused. Doing the Nook preview the Hark. Genesis. How come it's not giving me the rest? Oh, I got logged out. I got it. 1 second. That's why. Yeah, I got logged out, so I got to log back in. Sign out. Sign in. Hello. Oh, you guys are not even seeing the screen. All right, give me 1 second here. I'll get things back in. Okay, now let's go to my Nook. Now we can go to my book in my Nook. Like the bench on the bench. This is the book in the Nook. Let me share the screen again. There we go. The book in the Nook. Now it should be opening it up. There we go. Okay, now we got it. So I want to go to Genesis 28. Work my way backwards, maybe. It's too far. So maybe around here. So we're just talking about a grammatical point here. So here it says in Genesis 28, it says, Kibashem is vikach me avnei makom. He took from among the stones of the place, v'yasem me rashotav. He put it literally from, which I'll translate as around rashotav, his heads. Rashot tav. So it should be rosho, but it's rashotav. So maybe, well, let's see what's going on here. And that is verse 11. Put it at his head, right there. Okay. So let's see if there's any commentary. I don't think there'll be commentary from him on this particular issue. Why is it not going forward? 11, a certain place. Oh. I'd like to read this because this is what we were talking about before. Certain place, though, this is again Robert Alter. He's one of my go-to commentators. Kind of a modern, not religious, I don't think, but biblical scholar. Through archaeological evidence, though archaeological evidence indicates that Beth El had been a cultic site for the Canaanites centuries before the patriarchs, this pagan background, as Nahum Sarna argues, is entirely occluded. The site is no more than an anonymous place where Jacob decides to spend the night. Repetition of a term is usually a thematic marker in biblical narrative and is noteworthy that place, Makom, occurs 6 times in this brief story. In part, this is the tale of the transformation of an anonymous place through vision into Beth El, a house of God. Interesting. Okay. Well, okay. One of the stones of the place, there's scant evidence elsewhere of a general and uncomfortable ancient near shoot. Let's do that. 1 second, please. There's scant evidence elsewhere of a general and uncomfortable ancient Near Eastern practice of using stone as pillows. Sounds very uncomfortable. Rashi, followed by some modern scholars, proposes that the stone is not placed under Jacob's head, but alongside it as a kind of protective barrier. The stone by which Jacob is under, right? I see, based on my rabbinical background, I got trapped and said it means around his head because I remember learning that in yeshiva. See how careful you have to be as a Karaite? You constantly have to deprogram yourself from your previous studies. The stone by which Jacob's head rests as he dreams his vision will become the pillar. The commemorative or cultic marker, matzeva, at the end of the story, astutely, J.P. Fockelman astutely notes the stones are Jacob's personal motif, from the stone at his head to the stone marker, and then the stone upon the well he will roll away. The pile of stones he will set up to mark his treaty with Lavan. Interesting. Okay. Anywho, it doesn't really mention anything about this, why Rashot is used in the plural rather than the singular. See what Rashi has to say, although, of course, Rashi usually says a bunch of nonsense, but it's always interesting to see what he has to say. So this is 28. Rashi is one of the worst commentators on the Torah ever in the history of Judaism. He is an absolutely horrible, horrible commentator. His commentary makes no sense whatsoever. It's mumbo jumbo for the most part, but sometimes he raises some interesting points. Okay, so 28. We are in 11. 28:11. I'm sure he says something very midrashic and retarded. Yifga b'makom v'yifga. Okay, I'm not going to go to that. Semir Shotav. As'an kamin. Marzev saviv lo'elsho. So that's what Robert Alter was referring to. He did it as a kind of, I'm not sure what a marzev is. No. Like beres, I guess. Drain pipe. Okay. Marzev saviv lo'elsho. That's not a biblical Hebrew word. I've never heard that word before in my life. Shahaya mifnei chayot ra'ot. Shi'ara mifnei chayot ra'ot, because he was afraid of the wild animals. Itchilu merivot zo et zo. So this, I remember learning this in yeshiva. So the stones started fighting with each other. Zot omeret alai yaniach tzadik et rosho, vezot omeret alai yaniach. One stone, each stone said, Or one stone said, the tzaddik, this righteous man shall put his head on me. And the other stone said the same thing, basically. Immediately, God made them into one stone. And this is why it says that he took this stone that he had placed by his head, that he took the stone which he placed by his head. Oh God. I can't even tell you how stupid this is. Now, if you want to make it as just like a fun story, or maybe even a moral lesson, I don't see what the hell the moral. Well, maybe there's a moral lesson that even the stones will fight to be under the head of the tzaddik. So let's pretend it's a moral lesson, that this didn't really happen, and this just being presented as a midrash to teach a moral lesson, that when there's a tzaddik, that even the inanimate objects that have no brain, will fight. He's such a great influence in the universe that even the inanimate objects will fight to be under his head. But unfortunately, many modern or many Orthodox Jews of this time will actually, and not only of this time, but will actually believe this literally. When I was taught this in yeshiva, it was taught as if it actually happened, and it's still taught in most yeshivas as if it actually happened, because Rashi is considered the highest of the high, almost like an angel. And so I don't know, did Rashi really believe it happened? I don't know enough. I can't claim to be enough of an expert in Rashi to know his motivations for putting this, but I do know that many Orthodox Jews today will believe that this literally happened. So, and what is Rashi basing himself on? He's basing himself on, and I remember learning this very well in yeshiva, that, where is it? Where were we? So here it says that at night when the sun set, he took from the stones of the place so this would imply that he took multiple stones. So this implies that he took stones and put them under his head or around his head. And then in the morning, skip ahead a little bit. Okay, V'yikatz Yaakov, or in verse 16, V'yikatz Yaakov mishnato, yomer achen yesh Yehovah b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati, v'yar v'yomer v'yomer ma nora makom hazeh. Wait. No, that's not where it is. Yeah. V'shkem Yaakov b'boker. Here we are. V'kach et ha'even. So here it says he took the stone which he had placed under his head or around his head. So when he goes to sleep, it says he took stones. When he woke up in the morning, it says he took the stone. When he went to sleep, plural, stones. When he woke up in the morning, singular stone. So what happened? Well, that's where this genius Rashi comes in. He tells us what happened. The stones fought. They were fighting. They were around Yaakov's head, and they were fighting to be under his head because he's such a tzaddik. And then God, in his mercy, turned them all into one stone so that the stones wouldn't have to fight anymore. And they turned into one stone and they went under his head. And that's why when he wakes up, it says one stone. And when he went to sleep, it says many stones. And this is the garbage. This is the absolute nonsense that we were taught. That we were taught in yeshiva. The absolute garbage nonsense. Now, again, whether Rashi believed it literally, I don't know. However, I do know that the people who taught it to me in yeshiva in Israel did believe it literally. And that's already bad enough a problem. I have a feeling Rashi did as well. Because the galut can make you a little bit crazy. And Rashi was deep in the galut. He was in France. Okay. So, we go back. Anything you want to say? Well, anything you have to add? If you want to add something, let me know. Okay, so back to planet Earth. Well, not really. Back to Shemayim. Okay. Okay, so what's the real reason, by the way, it says
it says Avnei Makom, and then it says when he woke up, Evan. Okay. Well, I'd say two possible explanations. First of all, in verse 11, when it says Avnei Makom, from the stones of the place, that doesn't necessarily mean that could mean that he took a singular stone. It says he took a stone from among the stones of the place. But I don't really like that explanation. I think from the context here and from the words being used, he did take multiple stones. Okay? And when he took a bunch of stones and basically maybe formed them into a pillow shape and went to sleep on them. Okay? So when he wakes up in the morning and then says, "V'yikach et ha'evan," the single stone. So then the question is, what happened to the rest of the stones? Why did it suddenly become singular? And I think the reason for this discrepancy is clear here. That ha'evan, a lot of times we have what I would call, and I can't remember the official word for it, but the abstract singular. Okay, and we also have the abstract plural. Sometimes the plural can be made to represent a general term. Okay, such as the word damim, blood. Okay. The word is put in the plural to represent a general term, not multiple things. Okay, and here we have kind of the opposite. Here we have the singular representing the conceptual idea of stones. Yikach et ha'evan. So here we have basically what I would call the singular abstract. It's kind of an abstraction. Okay, he took literally it says a stone, but it really means the stones, because it's speaking about stone in an abstract sense. So how would we translate it maybe into English? He took the that which is made of stone. Maybe is the best thing I can come up with. That's not really a great example. But the point is that the word, even though it's singular, does not mean a single stone in this case. It really is representing plural, okay? Because it's talking about an abstract thing that happens to be stone, an abstract concept that happens to be stone, okay? Meaning it could be many stones, actually. I don't know how well I explained that, but I tried my best. Okay, so let's go back to where were we? Right. Okay. Okay, we're there. Verse 12. Yachlom. V'hine sulam mutzav arza. V'rosho magia hashamayma. V'hine malachei Elohim olim v'yordim bo. Okay, so here's the famous Jacob's ladder. I'm not going to translate every verse into English because we'll be here forever. V'hine, we're in verse 13. You can follow along with your favorite English translation. V'hine Yehovah nitzav alav, and behold, Yehovah was stationed above it. Okay, and here I will translate a little bit because I want to make a point. So God was stationed above it. A Hakham Yaakov ben Yisrael, who I respect his opinion on many, many different things. I don't agree with him on everything, but I certainly do respect his opinion. Always points out that whenever it speaks about Yehovah talking or appearing or whatever, it really is referring to an angel of Yehovah. The two are used interchangeably. Yehovah and an angel are used when interacting with human beings, except perhaps maybe in the case of when Yehovah spoke to Moshe, because it says that Moshe spoke with Yehovah as a friend speaks to a friend, unlike the other prophets who Yehovah appears to him in a vision or a dream. Okay, but so here this is not Moshe in a vision or dream, and therefore Yehovah is appearing in some kind of vision, and it's not Yehovah directly; it's an angel of Yehovah. Okay, and I think we'll see even more proof of that in just a bit. Nitzav alav. Yomer ani Yehovah Elohei Avraham avicha ve'Elohei Yitzchak ha'aretz asher ata shochev aleha lecha idnena ulezaracha. So, and then it says, I am Yehovah, the God of Abraham your father and the God of Yitzchak. The land which you are lying on is, I will give it to you and to your seed, to your male descendants. Remember, seed always represents male descendants. So he says, Ani Yehovah, but we know that Yehovah did not reveal his name until Exodus, right? Exodus chapter 11? Exodus chapter 9? Exodus chapter 9, I believe, okay? So how do we explain that? He says, I am Yehovah. Well, honestly, I just don't have an explanation. It's something I've thought about, and I don't have an explanation. I gave a couple of speculative points, which is that when the Torah was written down, we already knew the name of God as Yehovah. And so this is kind of like, what do they call it? Retrojecting or something like that. Telling the story, but using the word Yehovah, because when it was written down, when the Torah was written down, the Israelites already knew the name Yehovah. Hold on, I have to try to kill a fly. I'm here. This little bastard. All right. But more than that, I really don't have. I have a couple of other ideas. Okay, so let's just go on. אביך ואלוהי יצחק הארץ אשר אתה שוכב עליה לך אתננה ולזרעך. So here's another interesting grammatical point in Hebrew. A lot of mistakes are often made, especially by rabbinites, or maybe they're exploited by rabbinites to make midrashim. Again, I'll give the benefit of the doubt. God, this fly, hold on a second. I'm going to get him. So that a lot of times, where were we? A lot of times the modifiers of a word, in this case a verb, okay, are separated from each other. Okay, and here we have a classic example. Literally it says, the land which you lie on, okay, to you I will give it, and to your seed. Okay, well, in English we would say, to you and your seed I will give it, or I will give it to you and your seed. You wouldn't separate it by saying, to you I will give it and your seed, right? Because it almost sounds like, if I translate that in English, it almost sounds like, to you I will give it and your seed. Okay, I will give it and your seed. Okay, well, the grammar in Hebrew, certainly this is a dative. In other words, it's a the l certainly precludes that translation, because it's not oh, this flies. My God. So it certainly precludes the idea that I will give it and your seed. Okay, it's not in the accusative form. It's not a direct object. It's an indirect object, because we have the l here. So that obviously is not the translation, but even more so. But the point I wanted to make is, let's say you didn't know that. Let's say you even said, Eleha lecha etnena uzarecha. It's a bad example, but I'll just use it for the sake of argument. Okay, let's say there was nothing here to indicate whether this was an indirect object or a direct object. Still, we could assume that it's an indirect object, even though it's separated from this other indirect object or indirect pronoun, lecha, to you. Okay, because these both modify etnena, I will give it, and even though they're separated, you can still have modifiers of a word separated from each other. There are many examples in the Torah. This is maybe not the best example to illustrate what I want to say, but if I find another one, I'll point it out. The point I do want to make is that modifiers can be separated. Modifiers of a word or of a phrase or of a sentence can be separated from each other, and this is not done in English and the Romance languages. And so when we translate into English directly, it can cause a lot of misunderstandings. And when you have the medieval commentators like Rashi, I'm really out to get these flies, I'm sorry, whose native language was French, a Latin language, a Romance language, then he will often make these kinds of mistakes in trying to understand Hebrew, who kind of, again, retroactively apply the rules of modern language, of modern Romance languages, back to Hebrew. Okay. So, verse 14. V'haya zaracha ke'afar ha'aretz. Your seed shall be like the dust of the land, the dirt of the land, not the dirt. I think dust would be a better translation. How do they translate here? The dust, okay, meaning a lot. Okay, and we know this is a common promise, right? The dust of the land, the sand on the seashore, the stars in the sky. These are all promises that are given to the patriarchs about, and not only the patriarchs, later on about how great in number Israel will be. Okay, Genesis 15. Okay, they'll be like the stars of the sky, that they cannot be counted because they're so great. Okay, lo yimana merov. I think of the words used there. Let's just look at that for a second. And Avram Yedeki Geri become the question. One second. Where is it? Here it is. Verse 5. And God took Abraham outside. Yomer habet na shemaima. Look towards the sky. Sfor kochavim and count the stars if you can. Nisporotam, if you can count them. Yomer lo ko yezaracha. And he says, so will be your seed. Again, your male descendants, specifically your male line descendants. Ve'emin beYehovah v'yachshavelo l'tzedakah. And he believed in Yehovah, and this was, usually they translate this is rendered to him or accounted to him for as righteousness. Okay, so we have this common theme about the if Israel follows the word of God, then there will be a large nation. There will be many of them, and if we sin, then we'll be a me'at. We'll be a very small nation. We'll be a she'erit, a remaining surviving, a remainder. In modern Hebrew, what would be a better translation? You know, just a survivors, a small amount of survivors. Okay, so our size depends on how well we're following Yehovah or not. Well, what is our size right now? I don't know. I think they estimate how many Jews are there worldwide. 12 million, 18 million. I think 18 million. I think they say 6 million in Israel, 6 million in the United States, and 6 million elsewhere. How many Jews are in the world? 15.2 million. So that's not very high, right? Considering the world is filled with, what are we up to? 8 billion? Did we hit 8 yet? 7 billion? I think we're up to 7 billion. Population of the world. 7, almost 8 billion. Wow, too many people. Too many damn people in this world. Look at this. When I was born, there were 3.5 billion people. And now, that's crazy. The world has now, the population of the world has doubled in size since I was born. Okay, hold on. Bruce wants to come in. Just give me 1 second here. Let me let Bruce back in. Bruce will come in. Okay, so that's Genesis 15. So we made our point there. Let's go back to where we were. Vayazaracha kefara aretz paratzta yama v'kedma v'tzfona v'negba. West, east, north, south, west, literally towards the sea. Kedma, literally forward, because everything was measured from the rising sun. Okay, the directions were measured from facing the rising sun. Tzfona, to the north. In Arabic, the word for north is shamal. Shamal is a biblical Hebrew, is related to the biblical Hebrew word small, which means left. If you're facing to the east, if you're facing towards the rising sun, then the north is going to be to your left. So the Arabs, want to say something, Volk? Hold on. We have a comment from the peanut gallery here. The letter shin used to make the. You're gonna have to read this for me because you use it. Okay, wow. I think I'll post this. This is from. Let's see how we're gonna post this. Oh, afterwards. So, at any rate, so if you're facing to the east, then the north is to your left. So the Arabs still call the north. Here's Bruce. So the Arabs still call the north. Hello, Bruce. Shalom. We're in. Well, you can see here. There we go. So we're in Genesis chapter 28, verse 14, and we're just talking about the directions in biblical Hebrew. Okay. So paratzta yama v'kedma tzfona v'negma. Yama means towards the sea. That's the word that's always used pretty much in biblical Hebrew for the west, towards the sea, meaning of course towards the Yama Gadol, the big sea, that's what the Mediterranean Sea was called in biblical Hebrew. And then we have Kedma, which is east, but as I was just pointing out, Kedma really means forward, right? Like Kadima. Okay, so why is Kedma forward? Because everything in biblical Hebrew, or even in many ancient cultures, the directions were measured from facing the rising sun. The rising sun was considered the oops, Bruce, I'm gonna mute you, and if you want to say something, you let me know, because there's just a lot of noise coming off your mic. All right, so just type in a comment if you want to say something. All right. Oh, okay. No, I'll leave it open. So, because I'm sure you want to jump in and say something. So then if you're facing east, then the north is towards your left, right? If you're standing in Israel and facing towards Japan, then to your left is the north. Okay. Well, in modern Arabic, or not even only in modern Arabic, in classical Arabic, north is shamal. Shamal, as I was just explaining, is related to the Hebrew word small. The biblical Hebrew word small, like small v'yamin. That's already, we find both those words in the Torah. And so shamal is related to small. So the north in Arabic means to the left, right? They're doing from the same position of facing east. Well, in biblical Hebrew, they don't use the word shamal or anything like that. They use the word tzfona, which is related to the word tzafun, or tzadi ve'nun, which is usually considered to be the hidden places or the unknown places, because the north, I guess, was not too well explored at that point, okay? Or was considered like a mysterious place where who knows what goes up there. It was also very uninhabited, the north, right? Europe wasn't even inhabited until much later. Even in early Roman times, Europe was basically just like a vast northern wasteland.
In Europe for tens of thousands of years.
Yeah, but it wasn't very heavily populated, right? This is very sparse tribes here and there, right? Because it was too cold. Okay, Negba means to the south, but literally towards the direction of the Negev, desert. Negev from Nagav means dry, to the dry area to the south, but referring to the Negev desert. But in a lot of times in biblical Hebrew, the word for south is not Negba, it's Yamin. Yamin means right. Okay, so again, small, Arabic north is shamal, left, and biblical Hebrew south is right, yamin, yamina. Okay, so we have the same paradigm where the directions are measured from facing the rising sun. Now, when I was in Timna Park in 2019, we went to Timna Park near Eilat, just north of Eilat. And remember the guy at the he was showing us the replica of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, right? And he said all of the other ancient cultures, they had their temples opened up to it was the east, right?
They were facing the sun when they prayed.
They were facing the rising sun. You can't always be facing the sun when they prayed, right? They were facing the rising sun when they prayed, right? Not the setting sun, because that would be considered already like not gaining in strength. That's like a weak god to pray for. But the tour guide, who was very excellent, I think he was very Karaite leaning, even though he didn't say so explicitly, pointed out that the Beit HaMikdash, the door points to the west, towards the setting sun. But it seems that in ancient cultures that your main direction was the direction of the rising sun, and the temples, many of the temples, or maybe all of most of the temples in ancient Near East, their doors pointed towards the rising sun. So this would explain these directions. Okay. Any rate, وَنِبْرَخُ بَخَ كُلْ مِشْپَخَوْتَ האדמה ובזרעך. And all of the families of the earth shall be blessed through you, or in you, and in your seed. Here's another example where you have the two modifiers separated. Literally it says, and shall be blessed in you all the families of the earth and in your seed. So in modern English, we would say all the families of the earth shall be blessed by you and your seed, or in you and your seed. The becha and the bezaracha, that in you and in your seed would be together, but here we have the two modifiers separated. Okay, very common in biblical Hebrew, and I pointed that out before. So, Bruce, anything you want to say or add at this point?
I saw yesterday an interview on Israeli television in 1982 of Molly Picon. Do you know who she was?
Say the name again.
Molly Picon.
No, but I did have pecans for breakfast this morning.
Shame on you. You should. Your Jewish education is not complete until you Google Molly Picon, Picon.
Okay. Complete my Jewish education, please, Bruce.
Okay. I have records, 78 records.
Yeah.
From the early 1920s.
Yeah.
From my grandparents, whom I never knew.
Right. Wow.
They died long before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
And several of the records from the early 1920s were of Molly Picon singing and acting and speaking dialogues on these old records in Yiddish. Okay. Everything is in Yiddish. And here she was interviewed in Israel in 1982, black and white television. And she came to Israel to promote the Yiddish language. Because as you may know, Yiddish was scorned by the Bolshevik pioneers. They wanted to reintroduce Hebrew, and they had no use for Yiddish, and it was dying out. So here was Molly Picon. Anyway, to get back to how it relates to what you were saying, she was saying in Yiddish, they don't usually you use Hebrew terms very often for things like directions. And she says, no, but in Yiddish we say forward, backwards, left, and right.
Oh, interesting. Obviously coming from the Bible.
I don't know if she was joking or if it was serious, because I don't know Yiddish.
Oh, she was Yenta in Fiddler on the Roof.
Right, she was Yenta Fiddler on the Roof.
Oh, okay, I know her.
One
Everybody
of the
knows Yenta.
last she did.
Everybody knows Yenta. Okay.
At that time, she was already in show business, maybe 60 or 70 years.
Right. Yeah, so she was born in 1898, same year my grandfather was born, actually, and died in April 5th, 1992.
She lived a long life.
She certainly did.
Yeah. 94
years old. Yeah, pretty not bad. Okay, cool.
Okay.
All right, so let's go on. Verse 15. והנה אנוכי עמך ושמרתיך בכל אשר תלך והשיבותיך אל האדמה הזאת כי לא אעזבך עד אשר אם עשיתי את אשר דיברתי לך. So God promises at this point. Okay, so let's sum up here. So Jacob dreams and he sees the ladder stationed in the earth or planted into the earth and going up to the heavens, and angels are going up and down this ladder, and God, Yehovah, is stationed upon the top of the ladder, and he says, I am Yehovah, the God of Abraham and Yitzchak, and tells Yaakov that the land that he's lying on will be given to him and to his seed, and that his seed will be like the dust of the earth, meaning a lot, and this is what you mentioned before, uparatz the yama v'kedma tzvona v'negba, and they will break out or burst out in all four directions, and through you all of the families of the earth shall be blessed. And now he goes on to say, I am with you, and I will keep you, I will guard you, I will protect you, and I will bring you back. Because remember, now Yaakov is leaving. He's now in Bethel. Hear a banjo. Go ahead.
Faratsta yama v'kedma tzafona v'negba. Faratsta yama v'kedma tzafona v'negba. Faratsta yama v'kedma. Faratsta tzfona v'negba. Faratsta yama v'kedma. Faratsta tzfona v'negba. Faratsta yama v'kedma tzafona v'negba. Yama v'kedma tzafona v'negba.
Well, applause. So Bruce can say that an applause, but he hears actually applause. Very nice, Bruce. Very, very nice. Okay. So moving right along. So right. Verse 15, I will protect you, and I'll bring you back to this land. And I will do until I've done what I promised you. It's what I've spoken to you. Verse 16, Vikatz Yaakov Mishnato. Yaakov wakes up. Yomer Echen yesh Yehovah b'makom hazeh. Certainly there is God in this place. Anochi lo yadati. Verse 17, V'yirav Yomer ma norah hamakom hazeh en ze ki im beit Elohim. This is none other than the house of God. V'zeh sha'ar shamayim. And this is the gate to heaven. Right? So actually that's based on his dream, right? He sees the ladder
leading up to heaven, and the angels are going up and down, and God is sitting at the top, so he sees us as the gate to heaven. Well, we discussed earlier today that maybe there are some hints here that this is maybe speaking about the Temple Mount, so I'm not going to go into that again because we'll get bogged down. But you can look at this morning's study, anyone who wants to hear more about that. Verse 18, which gave me,
we never really got into the answer to the question. Philosophically, why would he think that, oh, God is in this place? What does that mean? God is in every place.
Well, then what do we need Jerusalem for?
No, but that doesn't answer the question.
Well, it kind of does. I mean, there are places where, okay, well, in the Torah's view of the world, okay, the Yehovah, what we might call in modern Hebrew the Shekhinah, or the presence of Yehovah, lives on this earth between the faces of the cherubim on the cover of the ark. Okay, this is okay. All right, you want to get really philosophical, Bruce?
No, I'm asking. I'm curious. Yeah. What was he thinking? There was no temple at the time. There was no cherubim at the time. There was no holiness of the Shekhinah residing in Jerusalem or any place at the time.
Right.
So what did it mean to him to say God is in this place?
Okay. Well, I'm going to answer on a philosophical basis what I think, okay? And then you'll tell me what you think also. So, Yehovah exists outside of space and time, right? He has no physical manifestation. That's the very basis of our Torah, right? Unlike other religions who may have physical manifestations for their gods, even though they claim they're monotheistic. We won't get into that. But there's no physical manifestation of our God, okay? He's outside of space. He's outside of time, okay? However, and I'll go even one step further and say that space and time are illusions created by our consciousness. You could say created by God, or basically God created within our consciousness the ability to perceive space and time. Space and time don't objectively exist out there. They are projections of our own consciousness. This has been proven by quantum mechanics and oh my God, I have two flies on me now. Hold on, let me see if I can get rid of one of them. Damn, none. And a book that I always like to mention, which I highly recommend, called Biocentrism by Robert Lanza. If you ever get a chance to read this book, I highly recommend. It really changed or expanded my understanding of these things. So
you're going to type it?
Yeah, I put in. You can't see it. Hold on one second. Here we go. Well, let me just find the actual book.
Biocentrism?
Yeah. There it is. Okay, so that's biocentrism.
By whom?
His name is Robert Lanza. He's not Jewish. He's Italian, actually.
Robert Manigan?
Robert Lanza. Here, I'm going to blow it up a bit. Darn. There we go. Can you see it on the screen?
Maybe if I put my glasses on.
I could send you. It's not a big deal. I could send you the link.
Lanza.
Yeah.
Lanza.
I can send you the link. No problem. So anyway, I don't want to go too far down that path because I'll go off track. But the bottom line is Yehovah lives outside of space and time. Okay. However, we as human beings, we live inside space and time. We cannot really escape
space and time, except maybe when we're sleeping or in a state of meditation or whatever the case may be. There's a question here. Okay, so we cannot escape space and time. We live in space and time. In fact, all physical entities live in space and time. This is the nature of a physical entity. The definition of a physical entity almost is that it exists in space-time. Okay, so we are, as physical entities, or as our bodies are physical entities, and our soul sees the world through our bodies. Okay, we are trapped within the constraints of space and time. Okay, while we're on this earth. When we die, then our soul and our body disconnect, and our soul is not trapped by the restraints of space and time. But while we're in our bodies, or at least while we're in a awake, conscious state, our perception is through space and time on this earth. Okay, so and even though Yehovah is outside of space and time, he has to communicate with us, who are inside of space and time. Okay, just like, for instance, a common comment I hear about the Torah is something along the lines of, "Oh, how can you say the Torah is not perfect? It's divine. It's we can't understand it because it's divine." And blah 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 blah. And my response is always, no, it's not divine. I mean, it's maybe written by the divine hand, but it's a communication with human beings. It's a communication between a perfect entity who's outside of space and time with human beings who are imperfect and inside of space and time. And so it has to speak to us in a language that we'll understand, or else it's completely meaningless. Just as like if we were to speak to a 3-year-old, if we start speaking on the language of an adult, they won't understand us. So it has to go down to the lowest common denominator. Okay, and so so the Torah itself is you could say constrained or restrained by the dictates of our physical existence. It has to talk to us human beings who live in space and time, et cetera, et cetera. So how does a perfect being communicate with imperfect, outside of space and time, communicate with imperfect beings who are in space and time? Well, maybe a good analogy again would be an adult trying to communicate with a little child. You really have to speak, you can't explain concepts in any level higher than they would understand. Okay, so getting back to the main question that you asked about Yehovah, how can this be the place? What was the exact wording? Right, the place of God, or the house of God, or the place of right? Indeed, Yehovah is in this place. Okay, well, Yehovah, yes, he exists in his essence, or he exists outside of space and time, but we exist in space and time. And if he's going to communicate with us, he has to communicate within the restraints of space and time, right? Just like we have to communicate to a little baby in baby talk. Okay, well, he has to communicate with us. We're in space and time. He's got to communicate with us within the restraints of space and time, or at least within the rubric of space and time, because that's all we understand basically in our conscious awake state. So therefore, we can say that if he wants to have a presence in this universe, okay, then it's going to have some of the restraints of space and time, and that's the whole idea of his presence living between the kruvim, between the cherubim that are in the ark, the cover of the ark. This is a place in the physical world of space and time where his shall we say energy or his essence exists within the physical world. Okay, so if you think of that as the point of emanation of his energy or of his essence, then we know that energy dissipates the farther you get away from it. Okay, and in fact, most energy goes by what's called the inverse square law. That as you double your distance from the energy source, like light or sound, the energy dissipates by 4 times. In other words, it's 1/4 of what the energy was before, and so on and so forth. So
so Yehovah's energy in this earth, if he's to communicate with the earth and communicate with human beings, and he must be his presence in this earth must be restrained by space and time, and that's the idea, I believe, of an actual place where Yehovah can be. It's basically a point in space and time on this earth where his energy radiates out from within this realm of space and time. And in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, it is on the Temple Mount between the cherubim on the ark cover. Okay, that's where he's shochan. That's where his shekhinah is. His essence is, you could say, or his energy is. And here it's Yaakov is saying that it's this place, right? So, which is to me is another proof that perhaps this place that's being spoken of, and as we spoke about this morning, or as we explored this morning, might very well be the Temple Mount. Might very well be the same Har HaMoriah that's mentioned in 1 Chronicles chapter 3, verse 1, and is also mentioned of a place, a case to be made, even though it's not explicit. But so I wanted to bring, so that's all nice and theoretical and philosophical and all this kind of stuff, but I'll bring it down to real earth, okay? You've been out of Israel, right? You've been far away, like in Alaska, I know, because you've told me some interesting stories of when you were in Alaska. You've been in Poland, right? Do you feel the same presence of God when you're in Alaska or in Poland that you do when you're in Jerusalem?
I don't know. I never thought of it.
Okay, well, I certainly don't. Okay, and I could tell you about the first time I ever came to Israel, and I landed in Israel for the first time ever in my life on June 23rd, 1993. And immediately I felt some presence, especially when I came to Jerusalem, and especially when I went near the Temple Mount, which I did that first day I came. I stayed in Aisha Torah and immediately went down to the Kotel for the first time ever in my life. And I just felt a presence that I had never felt before, a presence of God that I had never, ever felt before. And I wasn't looking for it. I really was not looking for it, because I came to Israel kind of on a whim. I just wanted to find out more about Israel, about Torah, about Judaism, all this kind of stuff. I wasn't really religious at the time. I was just kind of getting into the religion, but I wasn't like some wacko Baal Tshuva, you know. I had just basically started keeping Shabbat. Something told me back in America, I think I should start keeping Shabbat. I just felt like it was time, you know, it felt like something I wanted to do. And I came to Israel almost on a whim. It was basically like, okay, let's go check the place out and see what happens. So I didn't go there a priority expecting to feel some kind of presence of God, okay? But I remember very specifically having a number of feelings. And the first feeling, and I've told this to many, many people over the years, when I saw Tel Aviv, first of all, the lights of Tel Aviv and the plane start, I had this strange feeling, which I'd never, ever had before, because I'd gone to other places before. I said, this doesn't feel like I'm going away to a place far away. This feels like I'm coming home. And I'd never been there before. And it was just this deep feeling inside, like, I feel like I'm coming home. This doesn't feel like far away. Okay, I'd gone to other places. I'd gone to, at that time, well, that was 1993, so not that many places, but I'd been around the United States, and I think at that point I'd actually never been out of the countryside from Canada, but I'd been to like Puerto Rico and around the United States a bunch, and all this kind of stuff. And you know, when I went to Puerto Rico, I never said like, wow, this really feels like I'm coming home. But when I landed in Israel, even though I'd never been there before, and don't get me wrong, Puerto Rico is an absolutely gorgeous place, but it still didn't feel like home, okay? But when I landed in Israel, I said, this really feels like I'm coming home. This is very strange. I did not expect this, but I very strongly felt it. And when I came to the Kotel, to Jerusalem, to the Kotel especially, that area, I very strongly felt the presence of God like I'd never felt before, certainly never in New York, and certainly never in any other places I'd been. So I would say that from my own personal experience, that there is a physical emanation, or shall we say an energetic emanation of God from a certain point on this earth. You can call them like energy points. Maybe there are other ones as well, but the main one is Jerusalem, is the Temple Mount, okay? And we know that Solomon is told, even if the temple is destroyed, that if you turn to this place and worship and supplicate me, I will, your prayers will go up to heaven, Okay, and I will hear them, even if there's no more, even if you're not in the land, or even if this house is destroyed. That's what Yehovah says to Solomon when he comes to him in a dream, and after Solomon had expressed a desire to build the temple. Okay, so there is something about this energy source of Yehovah's presence in this physical world of space and time, which I believe can account for the fact that when you're in Jerusalem, when you're in Israel, when you're in Jerusalem, when you're on the Temple Mount, that you feel something special that you don't feel in Alaska or Puerto Rico or Poland or wherever else it may be. So,
Melech, or is it just you and me, or are other people?
No, there are other people here. Why?
Uh-huh. Because I wanted to recount an anecdote, but okay. I don't want to take up time.
No, go ahead. Go. Yeah. Take up time.
Okay, so I knew this. People, I've heard stories that when the plane is coming in for a landing in Tel Aviv at Ben Gurion, people are overwhelmed with a certain emotion. Or when the plane lands, they have this emotion. When they see Jerusalem from a distance, they get overwhelmed. When they go to the Kotel, I even have a cousin who is the furthest thing from Judaism, the furthest thing. He had married 2 shiksas, and even had a Christmas tree in his house.
Sure.
And he went to the Kotel because his brother got married in Jerusalem to an Israeli woman, and something happened to him. And now he has a beard down to his pupik, and he's very active with the Chabad Hasidim out of Brooklyn. And he did a 180-degree turnabout because of something that happened at the Kotel.
Right.
And here I came to Israel and I knew about these things. I even heard one person, they got overwhelmed when they stood on a street corner and they looked down at a sewer cover written in Hebrew letters.
Bruce,
and it happened to them.
Can I tell you something? I used to be the same. I was actually the same way. I didn't get overwhelmed, but I remember when I first came to Jerusalem. It's funny you should mention the sewer covers. I used to walk around in this days, almost like the spiritual days for the first, I would say, couple of weeks I was in Jerusalem. And I remember walking around Jerusalem and looking down at the manhole covers, and they have the imprint of the Lion of Judah on them. And I was like, oh my God, these are just not ordinary manhole covers. These are Israeli manhole covers with the emblem of Judah on them. This is unbelievable. And then I remember, you're gonna laugh, it was so funny. You could check this out. It was so funny. I remember looking at them one day, and I looked closely, and underneath the emblem it said "Made in India." You can go verify when you see one in Jerusalem. Look next time. I'm probably sure many, if not all of them, still say that. I remember I was so disappointed. I said, "This is an Israeli, this is a flag of the symbol of Judah, the lion, the Lion of Judah on it, and it says Made in India." It was burst my bubble,
So anyway, I was waiting. I was waiting to get overwhelmed, to have that experience.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't happening.
Right.
And then it happened. I was on a teacher's course, and we went out on a field trip to observe a class. And this was in Kiryat Gat, backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can say that again.
and the children, the school district didn't have enough money for each child to have a book. So they were sitting 2 together, reading their English book, and the teacher was up front teaching them. I remember it was the colors. And I never realized how many colors have an R in them. There's brown and green and gray.
Oh, in English.
And the teacher was having the class repeat the colors.
Mm-hmm.
brown, brown, gray, gray,
Mm-hmm.
green, green.
Yeah.
And at the point it was like ridiculous, but these kids were breaking their teeth trying to. I'm getting truth shivers now telling you this story.
Mm-hmm.
They were breaking their teeth trying to learn English
Mm-hmm.
because Hebrew was their mother tongue. And
Mm.
it hit me. It hit me
Wow. Wow.
at that moment.
Wow. Just the opposite of what we had to go through, right? Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, when you see, like Israeli kids, how they can just like, just completely pick up any Hebrew text, pretty much modern, ancient, and just run through it a zillion miles an hour. It's their native tongue. We take it for granted, but yeah, it's an amazing, amazing thing. It really is.
Oh, I left out red.
Red and orange.
Orange.
Yeah.
It's a lot of colors with orange.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, all right. So back to here.
Yeah, so I don't know. I understand everything you're saying, but it
Mhm.
really doesn't answer my question here.
Okay.
Why did he say God is in this particular place? God is in every place. Look, God appeared to the same Jacob through God spoke to him when he
Right.
was in Haran.
Right. But Jacob did not say about Haran, this is the house of God, and this is the gate to heaven, and God is in this place.
There was a burning bush in the Sinai someplace.
Right.
And God said, Moses, take your shoes off. This is a holy place. And
Holy,
it wasn't
yes.
Jerusalem.
He said it was a holy place for sure, and God appeared to Moses in the burning bush for sure, but is never this kind of language. This is the house of God. This is the gate of to heaven. So I think
that's what I'm questioning. That's precisely what I'm questioning.
Well, I think this is why you could make a reason. I mean, it really would require a full study. I mean, even this is the kind of thing like a PhD thesis in could be written on. Is this implying?
I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone.
Yeah, no problem.
مساء الخير يا هيثم، كيف الحال؟ الحمد لله أنا بصحة جيدة، وأنت؟ في الساعة 7 على البوابة. أوكي 100%. أوكي في أمان الله.
You're gonna go over and visit one of your Arabic friends at 7?
Yeah. I do shmirah, guard duty.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And to show you how crazy Israel is,
mm-hmm.
the Arab contractor pays me
right
to do guard duty. So I tell him, isn't this world crazy? You pay me to
right.
protect someone else from you.
So I don't understand. You do guard duty, what, at a construction site or something like that?
Yeah, at a construction site.
So your Arab friend is afraid that his cousins are going to come and rob the place or something if there's no shmirah?
No. I think if the security people, the Israeli security people,
right.
require that there be a guard whenever there's Arabs in the area. It's for the peace of mind for the Jewish mother.
Oh, okay.
Because
so I got it. So in other words, there's going to be a bunch of Arabs building in the area, and according to law, they need a Jew guarding them.
A Jew with a gun. Yeah.
And you're the Jew with the gun.
Yeah. But very often it's the Arab contractor
right.
who needs to have a guard in order to come in. So the Arab contractor pays me.
Right.
So he pays me to protect someone else from him.
Right. I mean, this is it would only make sense to someone who's lived in Israel, right?
It's insanity.
Can I tell you another story about when I first came to Israel, Bruce?
Go ahead.
This one will blow you away too. I told you I knew nothing about Israel. I'd never been to Israel before. The whole thing was kind of a whim to find out more. Okay, I always had this dream, I think, somewhere in the back of my mind or soul, ever since I was a kid, that someday I want to be in Israel. But I knew nothing about the place, essentially. Okay, all I knew is when I was in college, I was in the computer science department, and a couple of the fellow undergraduates in my department were Israelis, and they were the most obnoxious, disgusting people I'd ever met in my entire life. I hated them. I probably would have gone to Israel earlier if it were not for them, quite frankly. But and for some reason, I conveniently forgot how obnoxious they were before I decided to hop on that plane. Soon I learned the hard way about my dear Israeli brothers, so to speak. At any rate, many of whom are wonderful people. Don't get me wrong. But at any rate, so I get to Israel. Told you that first day, and I'm in Torah. And I go down to the hotel that first night, and I'm at the hotel, and I remember this very distinctly. I look up at the top, and I see the mosque, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, not the Al-Aqsa, the Dome of the Rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said to somebody, I walked over to someone at the hotel. I didn't speak a word of Hebrew back then, and I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, that's," said to me in English, "that's the Dome of the Rock. That's the mosque for the Arabs." And I said, on top of the Temple Mount? And he said, "Yeah, like, what are you, stupid? You don't know this?" And I said, I was shocked. I didn't know there was a mosque on top of our Temple Mount, because as I said, I knew very little about Israel. And I just remember being absolutely shocked. How is this even possible that there's a mosque, a different religion has their building on top of the Temple Mount? It just, from the mouths of babes. It was so shocking, and I realized over time how ridiculous I must have sounded to this person. But because once you get into Israel, things that never made sense before, this made no sense to me, that it's not possible that a mosque could be on top of our Temple Mount. Over time, it makes perfect sense. Of course, there's a mosque on top of our Temple Mount. When you come to Israel after a while, things that didn't make sense before, like you having to guard Arabs against themselves, start to make sense. But you have to be in this alternative reality known as Israel in order for any of this stuff to make sense.
Why did you think back then that there was no? Why did you never heard of a temple?
I didn't think there was a temple. I just thought there was a hotel, but I didn't think there was a mosque right on top of the hotel. At any rate, so yeah. Israel is like an alternative reality where the rules of logic and gravity and physics are suspended.
Kind of like the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, it kind of is like the Twilight Zone, definitely. Most definitely, it definitely resembles the Twilight Zone in a few too many ways. Okay, any rate, so let's go on. We'll get back to reading Genesis. I'm just going to turn the heat down a little bit. It's getting a little bit stuffy in here. Okay. So, right. So now we're in verse 18. וישכם יעקב בבוקר ויקח את האבן אשר שם מראשותיו, and we spoke about this before, the commentary of Rashi, and how, for lack of a better word, retarded it is. וישם אותה מצבה. So he took this stone that he'd used as a pillow, or one of the stones he'd used as a pillow, and turns it into a matzeva. They usually translate it as a standing stone or an altar, right? Pillar. ויצוק שמן על ראשה, and he anointed it, basically. Okay, this is what you do to altars, and in this case, he anoints it with oil. Olive oil would be the implication. Whenever you see the word shemen in the Tanakh, unless it's specified otherwise, and I think it's only in one or two places that there's even an implication that something other than oil of olive, then the word shemen basically means olive oil. That's what it is. Okay, al rosha. Vayikra et shem hamakom hahu Beit El, and he called this place Beit El, house of God. Ulam Luz Shema Ir La Rishona, and before its name was Luz. Wayidor Yaakov Neder, and Yaakov vowed a vow. Lemor im Yehieh Elohim imati, if God will be with me, ushmarani b'derech hazeh, and guards me or keeps me in this journey, asher anochi holech, the journey I'm about to go on, v'natan li, where he's going again to Haran, v'natan li lechem lechol ubeged.
When you're speaking of shemen being assumed that it's olive oil,
Yeah,
there's a hint in Arabic actually of what you're saying, because the word for oil in Arabic is zayt, and olive oil is zayt zaytun.
Yeah. In Portuguese, for instance, do you know what the word for olive oil is? Hello?
Go ahead.
It's azeite.
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 Uh-huh.
And
I think there's other examples of Portuguese and Arabic interchanging words.
Tons of examples. And Spanish as well.
For instance, the word for orange in Arabic is Portugal.
That's common not only in Arabic, that's common in a lot of different languages, because in ancient times, Portugal was the major producer of oranges. In when was it? Second Temple period, like 2,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago?
It was already called Portugal.
Right.
It must have been sometime after the 1000s or 1100s.
So in the Middle Ages already, like the 1000s or 1100s, the Portugal fruit was basically used to describe the orange, right? You know the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding?
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
So the girl's last name is Portucalis. And the guy's last name is Miller. Okay? And at the end, the father makes this big speech. He says, well, some people are apples and some people are oranges. But at the end, we're all fruit. Because in Greek, orange is portucalis, or something close to portucalis. I don't know the exact word. But the last name portucalis is based on orange. So that whenever you hear in various languages the word portucal or something like that for orange, it is speaking about Portugal, because Portugal was the main producer and exporter of oranges in the Middle Ages, whenever that was. So, anywho, but yeah, there are a lot of words that made their way into Spanish and Portuguese from Arabic. The example I gave is azeite is olive oil in Portuguese. Olives in Portuguese is azeitonas. So again, and there are many, many, many other examples, because obviously you know where this comes from, right? The invasion of the Iberian Peninsula by the Moors, starting in 711.
Yeah, they had concessions of 7-Elevens in Portugal.
Yeah, that's the other. But it's actually very easy to remember. If anyone ever asks you when did the Moorish invasion of the Iberian Peninsula begin and when did it end, it began in 711 and it ended in 1492, which you may have heard of before.
Sure.
Yeah, it's very complicated. The whole history of the Moorish invasion in the Iberian Peninsula, it didn't happen all at once, and they weren't all kicked out at once. They took over various areas. They were pushed back in a process called the Reconquista, the reconquering. And eventually in 1492, something called the Treaty of Granada was signed in Granada, Spain, which basically ended the last stronghold of the Moors in the Iberian Peninsula. Ironically, that was exactly the same year that the Jews were expelled from Spain as well. Granada had actually been a stronghold of Jews in the Iberian Peninsula, so much so that it said that Granada was basically like its own independent Jewish kingdom for a while. So anyway, long, complicated history, very interesting stuff. You know, if you ever want to watch, have you ever heard of this guy, Nick Gurs from Africa? Okay, we'll give this one a shot.
Niggers. I hate niggers. I hate niggers. Niggers are black.
Okay.
I hate niggers.
That was interesting. What the hell was that? I don't know. Okay, I've successfully removed it from the stream. How do I get rid of this guy? My God. I have no idea. Let's see how I can get rid of this. No, that's not going to do it. There we go. I'll have to edit that out if I can. My lordy. Okay.
Did you notice? Was he circumcised?
No, I wasn't. I was just trying. I didn't notice because I was trying hard to get rid of it. But let's see how I can get rid of this person. How do I kick someone out of here? He's off the screen, but he's still officially in the room. Wait a second. Oh, now he left. Okay. Well, I think from now on I'll be a little bit more careful who I let into the room. But okay, that's that. So back to Torah. So where were we? Oh, what were we talking about? We were talking about
A lot of things.
Yeah, but the last thing we were talking about was right, the Iberian Peninsula. Anyway, there's a long, complicated. Oh, I was going to say that there's he's not a rabbi. He's actually a professor at Touro College named Henry Abramson, who does a lot of lectures, especially about the history of Sephardic Judaism. So if you ever want to check him out, I don't call him a pure historian. He's kind of a rabbinical propagandist to a certain degree, but you can learn a lot from him. And he has a lot of stuff on YouTube.
Henry Abramson?
Henry Abramson. I'm going to post it. I listen to him all the time. Great person to listen to if you want to know the history of Jews, especially the medieval history of the Jews, and especially the history of the Jews in the Sephardic lands. That's kind of his area of expertise. Seems to be Sephardi Judaism, particularly Spain and Portugal.
I think I heard a lecture of his on Moses Montefiore. Is that possible?
It's definitely possible.
Uh-huh.
It's definitely possible. That's his name. So anyway, all right. So getting back to Tanakh. So okay, we did that one already. It's okay. So we're speaking about Shemen. ויקרא את שם המקום ההוא בית אל ואולם לוז שם העיר לראשונה. Okay, we're in verse 20. לאמור אם יהיה אלוהים עמדי ושמרני בדרך הזה אשר אנוכי הולך ונתן לי לחם לאכול ובגד ללבוש ושבתי בשלום, and I return and I shall return, and I will return in peace to the house of my father, meaning Yitzchak, who was in Canaan, of course. והיה יהוה לי לאלוהים, then Yehovah shall be my God. והאבן הזאת אשר שמתי מצבה יהיה בית אלוהים, and this stone which I have made into a standing pillar, into an altar basically, יהיה בית אלוהים, shall be the house of God. וכל אשר תיתן לי אשר אסרנו לך, and anything that he shall give me I shall certainly tithe. To you. Okay. So lays down conditions for God, right? Yaakov, okay, and protect me on this journey and give me bread to eat or food to eat and clothes to wear, and returns me, and I return peacefully to my father's house. Then Yehovah shall be my God. And then he uses this matzeva, Matzeva yeh beit Elohim, and this stone pillar shall be the house of God. Okay, okay, and I will tithe. Okay, by the way, I think that's another hint, as I mentioned earlier. That might be another hint, although a very weak one, that we're talking about the the house of God, because tithing, right, happens at the house of God, right? So, or happens to the Kohanim who run the house of God. At any rate, so Yaakov is basically saying, hey, God, if you do me good and you'll be my God. All right? He's basically setting conditions for God, right? It's kind of strange. He basically doesn't say na'aseh v'nishma, right? Whatever you do to me, you're my God. He says, if you protect me and give me food, give me and give me clothing and return me to my to my father's house, then you will be my God, and then you will be my God. Kind of weird, right?
And I'll pay you tithing.
And I'll tithe, right? Well, I think he implies maybe that he'll already start the tithing. I think that's a kind of an advance payment. That's the way I read it. The tithing. He's going to start the tithing now, but maybe he'll stop it if God doesn't protect him. Who knows? It's just kind of a strange language, right?
Yeah, it's like, where do you come off negotiating a business deal with the creator of the universe?
Yeah, but doesn't this run the family? Didn't Abraham negotiate a business deal with the creator of the universe over the people of Sodom and Amorah?
Right.
Right. And
Moses too, to a certain degree.
Yeah, Moses negotiated a number of business deals, right, to save the people of Israel. Well, any ideas? I'll give you what my idea is.
Let's hear it.
Well, there's this idea there's this idea of a brit, of a covenant, right?
Uh-huh.
And this is essentially a. It's not that Yaakov. Yeah, you could say more than that. Covenant, right? The Torah is a covenant between Yehovah and the children of Israel. Okay.
Yeah, an understanding rather than a business deal, right?
We see another covenant later in this parsha when Yaakov and Lavan basically make a covenant between them. They put up this pillar of stones, Gal'ed, right? You shall not pass this. Neither of us shall pass this pillar of stone, right? And they eat there together, and right. So in ancient times, if you read a lot of the kind of, I guess you call them biblical scholars or ancient Near East scholars, they'll talk about certain stages there was a certain protocol for making a covenant with somebody else, for cutting a brit with someone else, cutting not in the physical sense, like the guy who was on the was on the screen who did not cut a brit with God. Literally and figuratively. At any rate, so there's a certain thing, like you stipulate the conditions. There's a curse attached to it, or there's blessings and curses attached to it. There's something that serves as a witness. In this case, the matzeva is basically serving as a witness. And there's a certain whole protocol for, and often there's eating involved. There's a certain protocol involved for making a covenant. And so I think what the way that this should be read, in my opinion, is that it's not that Yaakov is giving God ultimatums. He's basically asking him or entreating him to enter into this covenant with him, into this promise with him. Right?
Right. I have two comments.
Yeah.
One is later on when you were talking about the brit between Lavan and Yaakov.
Yeah.
Yaakov keeps calling the andarta that he built a matzeva, and Lavan kept calling it something else. I forget the term, but it was interesting. And Yaakov kept insisting that it's a matzeva, that there was a certain kind of holiness, like God was the guarantor of this understanding. And that's why he kept insisting on calling it a matzeva.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go to those verses, since we're not going to get through the whole parsha anyway, right? So let's take a look at that, and that'll give us a perfect example to jump to that. But I have to get my charger. My battery's about to run out. So Bruce, would you hit us with another song while I'm getting my charger?
Okay, and the other thing is like a joke. God went to the different people, the different nations, with the tablet of the law,
Mm-hmm.
And,
Right.
you know, the joke, it's a very complicated joke, but I'll give you the short version. And each nation, for whatever reason, refused it. You know, I don't want to be obligated not to commit adultery. You know, I like lying. It's part of my culture, or, you know, whatever reason. And then he came to Moses.
Yeah.
And he said, would you like this tablet of the law? And Moses said, how much is it going to cost? And God said, it's free. So Moses said, I'll take 2.
All right.
The 2 tablets of the law.
Right, exactly. Or to quote Mel Brooks. I don't know if you're a Mel Brooks fan, but I'm a huge Mel Brooks fan. You know, in the History of the World movie. He comes down off the mountain, right? And he sees the Jews worshiping the golden calf. And he says, oh no, I'm sorry. He doesn't speak Jew. He just comes down off the mountains and he has 3 tablets in his hand. And he says, I give you, Israel, these 15. And then he drops one of the tablets by mistake and it breaks into 1,000,000 pieces. He says, 10 commandments.
None of us saw that.
Oh yeah. Mel Brooks is hilarious. Oh my God. He's really, really, really funny. Oh my God. All right, Bruce, I'm going to be right back. If you hit us with a song, please. I'm just going to go get my charger. It'll just take a couple of minutes.
Okay.
All right. So let me put
a song. Okay. Putting me on the spot.
If you want, or just, I don't know. If you want to just go ahead and continue reading, then that's fine too. But I'll be back in just a minute.
No, I'll do a song. Why not? Let's see, what song can I do? Wow, I'm in the wrong key. Let me go down here. Sorry, another phone call.
No problem.
Hi מוטי.
מה נשמע?
טוב, מה שלומך?
בסדר, בסדר גמור.
רציתי להזכיר לך שאני לא פנוי, נדמה לי כל השבוע.
טוב, אחד, קודם כל, יום שישי, סליחה, אני רק חוזר אחורה קצת, אז יום שישי אני לא הייתי, פשוט חזרתי שעה לפני כניסת שבת.
אוקיי.
אז לא הייתי פה, ועכשיו כן הייתי צריך אותך היום, מחר סליחה לבוקר.
אוי.
אבל לא נורא, לא נורא, זה קצת נורא, אבל אני אנסה למצוא מישהו.
יופי.
אבל תעדכן אותי אם הוא יוצא יותר מוקדם, כמו פעם שעברה.
אוקיי.
תראה, פשוט אני עכשיו עשיתי את ה... כי אני כן, אמרתי לך שאני כן חזרתי ללימודים עכשיו לתל אביב.
אוקיי.
יום ראשון ושלישי. אבל מה שכן, אני הבנתי וראיתי, שמתי לב בלימודים שהם לא מתחילים בדיוק ב5, הם כל הזמן קצת באיחור, 5:30, 5:45.
טוב לך.
בטח. אז כמה שאני יכול להישאר בשמירה יותר טוב בשבילי.
כן. Okay.
גם לא משנה. אם אתה רואה שאתה יוצא יותר
Oh,
מוקדם, אז כן.
okay. I'm gonna mute Bruce in the meantime. And Bruce, when you're ready to come back on, just let me know. I'm gonna go ahead with the studying here. Okay. Okay, we read that. We read that. We read that. Okay, let's go on to Genesis. Oh, we were going to go over to Lavan. That's in chapter 31. Start here. There we go. So, ויוגד ללבן ביום השלישי כי ברך יעקב. I'm in Genesis chapter 31 verse 22. ויקח את אחיו עמו וירדוף אחריו דרך 7 ימים וידבק אותו בהר הגלעד. ויבוא אלוהים אל לבן הארמי בחלום בלילה. So now God comes to Lavan the Arami בחלום הלילה in the dream at night. יאמר לו, הישמע לך פן תדבר עם יעקב מטוב עד רע. Basically, you stay away from Yaakov. Don't say anything to him at all. Verse 25, ישיג לבן את יעקב, יעקב תקע את אוהלו. This way a little bit brighter. תקע את אוהלו בהר, ולבן תקע את אחיו בהר הגלעד. Just want to see something for my own edification. Where are we? Down here. 26. Okay. Et meaning with. Okay. Bahar Hagilad. In this case. Okay. Yomer Lavan Yaakov, verse 26. Ma asita v'tignov et livavi. So Lavan says to Yaakov, what have you done? Literally, seeing that you have stolen. Okay, but tignov, you have stolen my heart, is literally what it says. And this expression comes again a number of times. And literally, you drove my daughters as if they were captives by the sword. Lama nechbeta livroach. Lama nachbeta livroach. So why did you hide from me? You're fleeing. V'tignov oti, and you literally again stole me. That's what it means. Okay, here we have tignovet levavi. You stole my heart, and here you stole me. I think it's probably just a shorthand for tignovet levavi. Stole my heart. Velo higarat li ve'ashlachecha b'simcha b'shirim v'tofel kinor. I would have sent you away with a great celebration, with happiness and songs and drums and how do you say kinor again in English? Not violin, that's the modern. Harps. So yeah, right. Sure he would have. Right. Yeah, right, Lavan. ולא נטשתני לנשק לבניי ובנותיי, אתה השכלת עשו. You tricked me, basically. You got wise with me. יש לאל ידי לעשות עמכם רע ואלוהי אביכם אמש אמר אליי לאמור, הישמע לך מדבר עם יעקב מטוב עד רע. Verse 30, ואתה הלכתי, הלכת, הלוך הלכת כי נחשפת לבית אביך. למה גנבת את אלוהי? Why did you steal my gods? Right? So now we get to the whole thing with the teraphim afterwards with Rachel. Let me see if Bruce wants to come back on. Okay, Bruce, you're back on.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And Ya'an Yaakov Yomer leLavan ki yareti ki amati pen tigzol et benotecha me'imi. So Yaakov answers and he says, I feared that you would steal your daughters back from me. Verse 32, Im asher timsa et Elohecha lo yichyeh neged achenu. If you, or with whom you find your gods, that person shall not live with his among his brothers. Haker lecha ma imadi v'kach lach v'lo yada Yaakov ki Rachel ganavtam. There's a lot of, often the Torah works with themes, and we see again and again the word ganav coming up in these verses. Let's see where it appears. Now in verse 26, Lavan says to Yaakov, Tignovet levavi, you've stolen away my heart. Basically, you broke my heart by sneaking away with my daughters and my grandkids. Okay? And again, same concept expressed there. יש לאל לעשות מדבר יעקב מתורתו ותחת נחשף לבית אביו. למה גנבת את אלוהי? Why did you steal my gods? Okay, so here we have again לגנוב. יען יעקב עם לבן תגזול, פן תגזול את בנותיך מעמי. Tigzol is similar to lignov. Okay, you would steal away my daughters, right? So Lavan says to Yaakov, you stole my heart. Then Lavan says, why did you steal my gods? And then Yaakov says, well, I was afraid you were going to steal back your daughters. Im asher timsat eleha lo yechen neged achenu. Haker lecha ma imadi v'kach lecha v'lo yada Yaakov ki Rachel ganavtam. He didn't know that Rachel had stolen the gods. We have a theme here of stealing, which I guess is appropriate to Lavan, right? He's a slimy, snake oil salesman, and so there's a lot of stuff going surrounding the idea of stealing, right? It's kind of interesting. So, verse 33, V'yavo Lavan ba'ohel Yaakov ba'olea. I'm going to skip ahead here because it's not the main thing. So here's the whole story with the teraphim, with the household gods. They usually translate that as, or the little idols, household idols. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Yaakov v'yarev b'Lavan. So Yaakov became mad. V'yarev b'Lavan, and he argued, or I guess argued, or what's the word I'm looking for?
Complained.
No, yarev, like lahariv. He basically, I guess you could say, fought with Lavan. V'ya'an Yaakov yomer leLavan, ma pish'i ma chatati ki dalakta acharai. What is my crime and what is my sin that you've come running after me? Dalak lidlok means to burn, or to smolder, or not, to burn, basically. And so here they translate as you have so hotly pursued, right? That you've come after me, like a burning fire. Ki mishasht et kol kelai ma matzati mikol kle beitecha sim ko neged achai ve'achecha ve'yochichu ben shnenu. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So here's the covenant with Lavan. This is what you wanted to get to, Bruce. All right, verse 43. Do you want to read it?
43.
Yeah.
You want me to sing-song it or read it?
As you wish.
V'ya'an Lavan yomer Yaakov habanot בנותיי והבנים בניי והצאן צאני וכל אשר אתה רואה לי הוא ולבנותיי מה אעשה לאלה היום או לבניהן אשר ילדו ואתה לך נכרתה ברית אני ואתה והיה לעד ביני וביניך ויקח יעקב אבן וירים מצבה. See here, Yaakov makes a matzeva. ויאמר יעקב לאחיו לקטו אבנים ויקחו אבנים ויעשו גל ויאכלו שם על הגל. And now they're eating on the, in English, this English translation I have says, uses a word I don't know, Cairn. I don't even know how to pronounce it.
I don't know what that is. I have no idea what that is. Yeah.
Okay. Vayikra lo Lavan Yagar Sahadutha. That's the word. Lavan calls it Sahadutha,
which are Aramaic words, right? Because Lavan.
Maybe.
No,
it looks
Aramaic. Aramaic words, because so Lavan was born in Haran, right?
No, but he in Hirsch's translation, he calls it a stone heap.
Yeah, but it's still Aramaic. These are not Hebrew words. These are known.
Yeah. It's it could be Aramaic. Yes, definitely. V'Yaakov karalo gal ed. See, he's calling it a stone heap, Laban,
right?
And Yaakov is calling it a gal ed, how would you translate gal ed? A wave of a witness wave.
Not a wave. Gal in modern Hebrew is a wave, but gal in you can even use it, I guess, in modern. A gal is usually translated as a heap.
Is a what?
A heap. A pile. Yeah.
Okay.
Because when you heap something up, it's like, I guess it's round like a wave, I guess would be the connection. So it's gal ed, a heap of witness.
Of witness. See, this is what Yaakov is calling it, and Lavan is calling it a heap of stones.
Well, and
it goes on. He repeats it.
Can I say something, Bruce, though? I would claim that Yigar Shahaduta, Sahaduta, might be the same as Gal Ed, just in Aramaic. And I'll tell you why I think so, okay? So Yigar sounds like Gal. We know in many languages that R and L are interchangeable, okay? Like in Chinese would be the classic example. If you hear Chinese people speaking, they won't be able to say or they'll mix up the R and the L, right? They'll say, good morning, right?
Yeah.
Or, your name is Risa, right? So L and R are linguistically interchangeable a lot of times. So this could easily be Yigal, right? Which would be the same as Gal. Sahaduta. So I don't claim to know exactly what it is, but I have a hint that we could look further at. Maybe that sounds to me like shahada, right? And the shahada in Arabic, shahad, I believe, means to swear or to witness, right? When you do like the shahada, I'm not talking about shahid. That's a martyr. They usually translate this. But if you want to become a Muslim, you have to state the shahada, right?
Yeah, and ashadu, right? I declare.
Right, declare. So like a declaration or a witnessing, right? So I'm curious to know if this word, because sin and shin are basically interchangeable also.
Okay, but still, Lavan keeps using a different word than Yaakov is using. Yaakov is using matzeva and gal ed, and Lavan uses another term.
All right,
And
well, let's go ahead and
I find it cute. It's
but
cute.
I do want to point out that Yigar Sahaduta might very well be just the Aramaic translation of Gal Ed.
Well, then it ruins the humor.
Okay, go ahead. So it's not then.
Okay. Gal Ed. Vayomer Lavan Hagal. He just calls it a gal. Hagal hazeh ed beni uvenecha hayom al ken kara shemo gal ed v'hamitzvah asher amar yitzefyo ha beni uvenecha ki nisater ish mere ehu. Anyway, that's all that I wanted to point out, is that when they were talking, Yaakov keeps using certain terms, and Lavan uses other terms. He uses gal, or he uses that Aramaic, what's it, sahaduta.
Okay. Well, Lavan is Aramaic. Remember, Lavan was born and grew up in Aram Naharaim, in the Aramean kingdom. Yaakov was born and grew up with, and has never left until this moment, has never left the land of Israel. So he spoke Hebrew, or at least the Canaanite language, right?
So wait a minute, what did Abraham speak?
Well, Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldees, which was part of Samaria. So I guess we can assume he grew up speaking ancient Sumerian, not Sumerian. And then he was moved by his father Terach to Haran, which is in the Aramean kingdom, which is in Aram Naharaim, the Aramean kingdom between the two rivers, the Euphrates and
that's where Lavan is, right?
Right. So we can assume Avraham also learned Aramaic there. Lavan stayed, okay, but Avraham went on to Canaan, so we can assume he picked up the Canaanite languages there, which are basically
so Hebrew was learned after they got to Canaan.
I would say absolutely.
Okay.
Some ancient Sumerians did not speak Hebrew. They spoke Sumerian, which has basically been deciphered, right? Well, Sumerian has been completely deciphered by this time, right? Yeah. And then Aramaic is certainly it's a Semitic language. I'm not even sure if Sumerian is a Semitic language. I think it's actually more closely related to Sanskrit. Is it? It's a language isolate, not related to anything. Okay, so Sumerian is a language isolate. Aramaic is certainly as we well know, a Semitic language. So similar to Hebrew and the Canaanite languages, but certainly not the same. Which is why we can try to extract Semitic roots from this Yigar Sahaduta, because it's a Semitic language. And then, of course, the Canaanites spoke whatever Canaanite languages were spoken at that time. And, there were a bunch of different Canaanite languages and other languages that are related, other Semitic languages that are related to it, like Akkadian was the big one at that time. This is, I guess, before the Aramean kingdom really grew, and then Aramaic became eventually. But yeah, it's we can assume that Avram spoke 3 languages. He's able to speak when he buys the cave of Machpelah. He's able to speak to the Bnei Chet, the Hittites in the area of Hebron, right? To Ephron, the of Bnei Chet, right? So he speaks to them, and he seems to be speaking in Hebrew or in the Canaanite language. So,
when are we going to build a time machine and go back and check out who is speaking what, where, and when?
Well,
it's so interesting.
meantime, we have it's absolutely fascinating. In the meantime, we have archaeology. You know, we know, for instance, just as a side note, we know that the Phoenicians. What? Sahaduta. I'm going to send it to you. 1 second. 1 second. I just sent it to you. So, we know that the Phoenicians, they trace their origin back to the 8th century BCE officially, even though that's not necessarily, it's more or less correct, that they also spoke a Semitic language, you know.
That was very close to Hebrew.
Extremely close to Hebrew. In fact, as I've pointed out before, Carthage, you know, they colonized many places around the Mediterranean, but their main colony was Carthage, which is in modern day Tunisia, in Tunis. And I happen to know something about it because we visited there in 2018. We spent about a month in Tunisia, in Tunis, and we visited Carthage. You know, explored Carthage extensively. And but you know what the word Carthage means?
I'm supposed to know. If you tell me, I'll tell you. It's familiar.
It's Phoenician. The Phoenician. It's originally Phoenician name, and the Phoenician name is Kart Hadasht. So, the Phoenician language has for feminine, just as Hebrew does, a taf at the end. But it's related. But Hebrew also has the hey at the end for feminine. So it's basically equivalent to the Hebrew kiryah hadashah.
And you know, Hannibal.
Yeah, Hannibal, the beloved,
right,
or the beloved of Baal.
Right, Chen Baal and Hasdrubal also.
Yeah.
Chesed Baal.
That's right. So So Carthage is Kart Hadash, Kiryah Hadashah, the new city, because there was an old city which still exists. The ruins of it still exist in Tunis. It's about, I think, it's about an hour drive from Tunis, or something like that, to the south west. There's a city there called. Have you ever heard of a city in New York called Utica?
Yeah, sure.
Well, the original Utica is in modern day Tunisia, and is southwest of Carthage. And do you know what Utica means originally, or what its original name, what its real name really is in Phoenician?
Go ahead.
Attica.
Again?
Attica.
Attica.
Right.
Attica. Ah.
Because it was the old city. It was a city that was inhabited before Carthage, the new city, Kart Hadash, Kiryah Hadashah, was settled.
Huh.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I love that kind of stuff.
I'll give you one more. Okay. Do you know the origin? It's disputed, but one of the accepted, and this is not like some kind of folk etymology, one of the accepted etymologies for Spain. So Spain is, in Spanish, is España, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it really goes back to, the name España really goes back to, and by the way, this España was originally the entire Iberian Peninsula, goes back to what the Romans called this region, the region of the Iberian Peninsula. They called it Hispania. That's why you have Hispanic. Okay? With me so far? So Spain is originally the province of Hispania. That's what the Romans called it. So where does the word Hispania come from? Well, it's not 100% clear, but one of the accepted derivations for the word of Hispania is from the Phoenicians who came to that area, came to the region of Spain and Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula, and they saw a whole bunch of hyraxes running around, or what they thought looked like. What's that? Yeah, they thought they were hyraxes. They looked like the hyraxes back in the land of Canaan, or in the land of the
of the Phoenicians. So how do you say hyrax in Hebrew?
I don't know what that word is.
Hyrax is, okay, so it's in Leviticus chapter 11. Let me bring it up for a second. Yeah, it might have. Right. That's why I said we don't know. Yep. We know that.
Oh, it's an animal. It's an animal.
Yeah, it's the animal that's used here. Verse 5. Leviticus 11, chapter 11, verse 5. Ve'et hashafan. And if I roll over this, then I get a translation into English, which says the rock hyrax. It's often translated as the hair. I know, but that's the theory I'm talking about right now. We don't have to worry about the other theories. As I said, it's not set in stone, but it's one of the accepted theories, right? So the hyrax in Hebrew is the shafan. Ki ma'ale gera. So why is it unkosher? Because it chews its cud. I have to get a little bit of water. Just give me 1 second, Bruce. I apologize.
Okay.
To see some. Oh, I don't have it up. Oh God, I keep on forgetting to switch over to the other type of screen. There we go. Now you can see it better. Leviticus 11. So Leviticus 11, verse 5. So eta shafan. And if I roll over it again, you see the rock hyrax, basically the hyrax. Okay. Ki ma'ale gera, because it chews its cud. Who? It chews its cud. But fasalo yafris, but it does not have split hooves. Tamehu lechem. It is unkosher or impure for you, unclean for you, right? So that's the hyrax, the shafan. Okay, you can see them running all over En Gedi, for instance, and they're actually related to the elephant, believe it or not, and the manatee. Seriously, oh my God, it's unbelievable. You wouldn't expect. They're not related at all to the rabbit or the hare or anything like that. They're actually evolutionarily related to the manatee and to the elephant. At any rate, neither here nor there. So the Hebrew word for hyrax is shafan. When the Phoenicians, who again spoke a language similar to Hebrew, close to Hebrew, came to the Iberian Peninsula, they saw all these animals running around, which they thought were hyraxes, and their word for hyrax was something very close to shafan, like it was shafan. Shapan. It was right. So it was Shapan, okay? And they thought the Iberian Peninsula was an island. They didn't know it was a peninsula. And so they called it the island of the hyraxes, or in Phoenician, Shapan, or Shapanim, or Shapanim. Well, that became distorted into people. One of the theories is that's what became distorted into Hispania.
Wow.
So Hispania actually means Shfanim, the island of the hyraxes. And that later became, of course, Hispania and Spain, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, cool stuff. Exactly. Okay, so moving right along. Let's see. Let's go back to, okay, so we're in this covenant here and you were reading, so go ahead. We're up to verse 47, I think. Thereabouts.
Okay. Right. I read that. Vayikra lo Lavan Yagar Sahadutha.
Right.
V'Yaakov Karalo Galed.
Mm-hmm.
So here in that one verse, you see, he called it one thing and Yaakov calls it another. Vayom alavan hagal haseed beni uvenecha hayom al ken karashmo galed v'hamitzpah asher amar yitzef yoha beni uvenecha necha ki nisater ish mire'ehu I think I'm going to quit. My voice is
No problem. No problem. I can't do the same
What do you
sing song
want?
that you can, but I'll read it. Hamitzpah asher amar yitzaf. Just fill it up when you drink. Yitzaf Yehovah beni uben benecha ki nisater ishme rehu. So he says basically this is the thing that will look over us. This heap of stones. So Lavan is saying it. This is the thing that will look over us when we are far from each other, when we are not able to look after each other, to make sure, in other words, that this covenant between them is not broken, right?
Right.
And this is specifically a covenant. It says in verse 44, let us. So Lavan says to Lavan says to Yaakov, let's make a covenant between the two of us. Okay.
Yeah.
So right, verse 50, im ta'aneh et binotai, if you oppress or if you are don't treat my daughters correctly, I would translate that as
right.
The im tikach nashim al binotai, and if you take other wives in addition to my daughters. Okay, so in other words, so this also gives insight to how ancient Hebrew works. Im ta'aneh et binotai ve'im tikach nashim al binotai. So this would be translated, if I were to translate it in a kind of literal translation, it would be if you oppress my daughters, or if you treat my daughters incorrectly, and if you take women in addition to my daughters, okay? So it would seem like Lavan is saying two things: A, don't treat my daughters incorrectly, and B, don't take any more wives. Okay, but really it's one and the same, because the way ancient Hebrew works is I'll translate it the way I understand it. If you mistreat my daughters by taking other women in addition to my daughters, etc., etc. So often the Torah will introduce two statements which look like they're connected by an and, but they're not. Well, the second one is explaining the first, and that's what's going on here. So Lavan is saying, if you oppress my daughters, or if you mistreat my daughters by taking other women, okay, ve'in ish imanu re'eh Elohim ed beni uvenecha, and there's no person with us. In other words, no one to do anything about it. Then let God see this witness. Literally, let God see a witness between me.
Melech, it's more than that. If you take other women besides it, the impression I get from the Hebrew is that you're going to take other women for wives and chuck my daughters.
I don't think you could read that. I don't think you could read that in from the.
You think take other women in addition to my daughters, and
absolutely, this is Nashim.
The way I see it, the way I'm feeling it is that if you take other women and chuck my daughters.
I don't think so, because if so, it would say something like Tikach Nashim Tachat Binotai. That's the way you would say in place of in biblical Hebrew. And here it doesn't say Tachat Binotai, it says Al Binotai, which means in addition to, on top of.
No, it's not clear. It's not clear. I think in Hebrew you would say Tikach Nashim Binosaf. In addition, or something like that. I don't know. It's not clear. And
I think it's quite clear, because the word there, al, means in addition to. Literally on top of, right? So
on top of.
You put something on top of it, you're not taking the original thing away, you're just adding on top of it, right?
And maybe
there is a word in biblical Hebrew to express in place of, that would be tachat.
literally underneath, right? Al and tachat, they both. It's
Okay,
interesting.
maybe to give priority to new wives.
Okay.
Tikach nashim al, priority.
Well, again, al means in addition to and on top of, and tachat means literally underneath, right? Like undercutting, I guess you could say, but it means it means in place of. Okay, so in that case, you would be like putting the new ones, inserting them in place of the other ones, underneath the other ones, and the other ones, I guess, go away.
Right,
but,
like
anyway,
like giving priority.
Okay, all right, let's leave it at that then. Ein ish imanu Elohim. And so if no one else, then God is going to see this witness. What is this witness? It's this heap of stones between me and you. That's verse 50. Verse 51, Vayomer Lavan liYaakov, and Lavan said to Yaakov, V'hinei hamtzava asher yariti beni benecha. And now notice there are two things, by the way, and that's what I wanted to point out. There's a matzeva, and there's a gal. There are two things here. Okay? Because remember, Yaakov, let's go back over this a second. So in verse 45, Yikach Yaakov Evan, Yarimeha matzeva. So Yaakov took a stone and set it upright to make a matzeva, which is usually translated as a standing stone. Okay, here they translate as a pillar. Okay? Then Yaakov says to his brothers, I guess the people who are with him, I'm not sure who the brothers are referring to actually. Gather stones, so gather stones and make it into a heap. And they ate there on the heap of stones. You have two things. You have a single stone that became a matzeva, and then you have next to it, you have a heap of stones, which is where they ate. And remember, I mentioned that in cutting a brit, one of the things that's commonly done in ancient times is you have a meal together to basically solidify the covenant, right? And that's what they're doing. Well, then we get to 51. So Yomer Lavan liYaakov, Hine hagal hazeh v'hine hamatzeva asher yariti beni ubenecha. This heap and this pillar, this standing stone, asher yariti beni ubenecha. It's interesting in itself because Lavan says to Yaakov, this standing stone and this heap of stones, which I have placed, I think it's the verb here is lirot, to shoot or to throw down. Beni ubenecha. Lavan is saying he did it. Okay, well Yaakov is the one who did it. Clearly we see earlier, but okay, I don't know. I guess Lavan is taking credit for whatever reason. And then verse 52, Eid hagalazeh. Ba'edah hamatzeva. So we see there are two things, right? There's the gal and the matzeva. Eid hagalazeh, ve'edah hamatzeva. So the gal is an aid, it's a gal aid, and the matzeva is an edah. Well, it's an aid, it's a witness also. It's just matzeva is feminine, so edah is feminine, right? So we have two witnesses here, and actually, it's something very interesting that I just realized. There's a male witness, that's the gal, and there's a female witness, that's the matzeva. And I'm just thinking to myself, that's a very common motif in ancient Canaanite and other Near Eastern, shall we say, holy places. There's a female god, there's a male god who represents strength, and there's a female god which represents fertility. So I'm wondering if that's what's going on here, at least from Lavan's point of view. Isn't that interesting? Hello? Bruce?
There were people of a lot of faith that they set up a pile of stones, and this pile of stones bears witness somehow to keep you well behaved and keep you, what's the word, true to your commitment. A pile of
Mhm.
stones.
Well, it's a symbol. It's not the pile of stone that literally does it. The pile of stone
Exactly,
is a
it's
symbol
a
of
symbol.
the oath that was taken.
It's a symbol, but
Right.
so say you break your covenant.
Mm-hmm.
What's the pile of stones?
Right. Yeah.
They were people of a lot of faith.
Mm-hmm. Well, there were people who, I guess, each feared his own God, or at least each believed that their respective gods will reward them for keeping a covenant and punish them for not keeping a covenant. You know, I don't know if it's. I mean, in Yaakov's case, it's certainly faith. Did Lavan have faith? Maybe you can say Lavan had superstition, you know, or he believed in his own God, whoever the hell that was, you know.
You know what this reminds me of, Melech? When I
Yeah.
visited Kiev in the Ukraine,
Yeah.
my hostess took me to a place. It was like a kind of a church or a catacomb
Mm-hmm.
where there were these saints buried, but they
Mhm.
weren't really buried. You could actually see the bodies under like a cloth,
Mm-hmm.
and people would come in
Yikes.
and they would kneel down and they would kiss the catacomb.
Yeah.
And then we left there, and there were like hundreds of people. And
Okay.
with pride, my hostess said, "Aren't you impressed with the faith of these people?"
Right.
And I said, "You know what? I'm very impressed." So
Right.
she said, "So why don't you think of becoming Catholic?"
Right.
And I said, "You know, as impressed as I am with these people's faith,
Because I wasn't born with shit for
obvious,
brains.
which is obvious," I said, "look back in biblical times.
Right.
People had more faith.
Right.
They would sacrifice their children to
Right.
their gods. They had so much faith. But
Right.
this was an abomination."
Right.
And so that's what I see here. I see this,
Right.
that they're celebrating and worshiping their
Mhm.
saints by kneeling down and kissing the catacomb as
Right.
abominable. But yes, they have
Yeah.
a lot of faith. I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's abominable.
There's
Also, I said,
Mhm.
Jesus would also say it would be abominable.
Mm-hmm. I hear you, very possibly. But you know, this goes back to an argument which I've had with, or this, I guess, a philosophical argument that I've had with many people over the years. And who is more righteous, an idol worshiper or an atheist?
I don't know.
It's really a kind of a fascinating question, because an idol worshiper at least still believes there's a higher power than himself.
Right.
So he's restrained by some kind of morality laid down by that higher power or higher powers, as the case may be. Whereas an atheist doesn't believe in any higher power. And so, you know, en lem Elohim, right? Literally. You know, there's no God above them to tell them what's right and wrong. Yes, they can come up with reasons like utilitarianism, you know, like do not do that which is evil to yourself, do not do to others, and stuff like that, you know. But does an atheist, you know, is an atheist more restrained by morality than an idol worshiper is? I don't know. It's
I don't know, but God says it's the first commandment. Have no other gods before me.
I know. I know it's the first commandment.
Yeah.
But it still raises an interesting philosophical question. Who would you rather be around, an idol worshiper, a Hindu, or an atheist? You know, a Christian or an atheist? Who's more moral? In theory.
I don't know about who's more moral, but who does God find problematic? Well, I think God would find the idol worshiper more problematic than the atheist.
I would 100% agree with you. It's clear. The Torah does not, the Tanakh does not rail against atheists. It rails against idol worshippers, right?
Yeah, because
it's a big sin.
Our God is a jealous God.
Yeah, but that's true. But let's say you're not of Israel. Okay, so he's not as jealous for the other nations as he is for Israel, right? Because when it says God is a jealous God, it's always pretty much in the Tanakh, at least speaking about Israel, okay? And Israel going to idol worship. But let's say you have, Indians out in wherever worshiping their 10 million gods as Hindus. Would you rather be around a Hindu, or would you rather be around like an American atheist? Let's say some liberal atheist from San Francisco. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I'm not saying atheists don't have morality. They do. They justify it in various ways. And in fact, really, people have morality whether they want to or not, because whether they admit it or not, they still believe in God. Their soul believes in God, even though they don't know it on some level. But it's always an interesting question, like who is more restrained by morality? An idol worshiper? Thing about him to restrain his behavior, except for just logic, at least on a conscious level. I don't know. Right. It's an interesting question. But it does go back to what you're saying, that idol worshippers have faith. And Lavan had faith in his own gods. Right. So this brit that they cut between them is meaningful to Lavan because he fears his own God, whoever the heck that was.
Right.
So, all right, it's getting kind of late. So let's finish it off.
He was indignant that his gods were stolen.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Good point. Let's just finish off these couple of verses, and then maybe we'll kind of start summing up and finishing it off. So again, it's interesting. I see a gal, which is an aid, and a matzeva, which is an edah, a male and a female. Could be, that same motif that we see a lot of time in the ancient Near East cultures, where they had a male and a female god next to each other as at their holy places, at their high places. Okay, im, and who's the male and the female god in the Canaanite cultures? It's the Baal and the Asherah, right? Always, you see the same motif. You have an idol worshiping the Baal, which is usually a bull, and then you have an Asherah, which is a tree. Trees represent fertility because they bear fruit. The bull represents strength, and then the female god represents fertility, strength and fertility, male and female. Anywho, im ani lo evor elecha et hagal hazeh, ve'im ata lo ta'avor elai et hagal hazeh, ve'et hamatzeva hazot le'ra'ah. So this is a witness. Both the gal and the matzeva are a witness that no one should cross them to the other side to do, to bother the other person, to do evil to the other person. So this is like the border between them. They lay down a border between them. Lavan is now not allowed to cross to the west of this border, and Yaakov is not allowed to cross to the east of this border. And in fact, for the rest of his life, Yaakov most certainly does not cross, right? He goes back to the land of Israel and then eventually makes his way down to Egypt. But aside from that, he never leaves the land of Israel again once he gets back, until he goes down to Egypt, right? To meet Yosef much later in his life. Verse 53, Elohei Avraham ve'Elohei Nachor. That's interesting. Elohei Avraham ve'Elohei Nachor. Well, there's your answer right there.
There's two different gods.
Yeah. Well, Nachor is Abraham's brother, right? Nachor is the grandfather of Lavan. Lavan's father, Lavan and Rivka's father is Bituel. Bituel's father is Nachor. So yeah, you could read here that these are two different gods. In fact, I would say that's the probable reading. Or you could say that they're the same gods, and each one is just mentioning their own ancestor, because it certainly wasn't the god of Terah, right? So Nahor doesn't seem to be, part of the party that Avraham is, he doesn't seem to have any interest in Avraham's mission, right? So yeah, I would read that as, there you go. There's your answer right there. Two different gods. The God of Avraham. So Lavan worshipped the God of Nahor, whoever the hell that was. He worshipped the God of his grandfather, Nahor. Whereas Yaakov worshipped the God of his grandfather, Avraham, we know who that is. Really interesting stuff, right?
Yeah, very.
Yishpatu, and there's your answer right there. They shall judge. And what's interesting about this is that if it were just one God, if they were one and the same God, it would say Yishpot. Because even though Elohim is in the plural, we know that it's the majestic plural. We know that in the word Elohim, right? Bereshit bara Elohim. It doesn't say Bereshit baru Elohim. This verse sums it up. Elohei Avraham Elohei Nahor Yishpetu. Both gods, Benenu, will judge between us. If we're the same God they were talking about, then it would say Elohim, Elohei Avraham Elohei Nahor Yishpot.
Right. Or they would say Elohim.
Elohim? Why?
Yeah, the dual.
Okay. All right. Well, Elohim is already plural, so you can't do a dual on top of a plural. Yeah, there is a singular Eloha. Yeah, I guess you could say Elohim, two gods. Yeah, but it's not. It's usually Elohim is already plural because it's what's called the majestic plural. Like when the queen says, oh, we shall have tea now, and there's only one of you there. Or it reminds me of an old joke about someone going to the south and saying I met someone there, and let's say, I don't know, up in the, I don't want to single out any particular state, but I met someone there and from the south, and he said, I'd like you to meet my daughter and my wife. And there was only one woman standing there.
Go ahead.
That's it. That's the joke.
Is that the joke?
Yeah. You don't get it?
No.
I'll say it again, okay? I went to the south.
Oh.
And I went to the south.
He married his daughter.
Yeah. And I met someone and said to me, I'd like you to meet my wife and my daughter. And there was only one woman standing there. All right. Anyway. So.
Do you know Rabbi Avraham Feld?
I believe I've heard the name, and I may have met him at one time or another. He had something to do with Kahana, right?
More with the Ephraimites. He works a lot with the Ephraimites. Anyway, I met his mother once, and she's from, I think, Louisiana or maybe Alabama. Anyway, a real Southern lady.
Right.
So she asked me where I'm from.
Right.
So I said, I'm a Yankee. And she says, no such thing as a Yankee, only a damn Yankee.
I like that. I'll have to use that. Good old Southern hospitality.
Right.
You always know where you stand the Southern. So, okay. Alrighty. So, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Nahor. Anyway, this basically proves it's two different gods right here, Yishpatu. Because if we were one and the same God, it would say Yishpot here. And it says Yishpatu. So these are two different gods. I don't know who the God of Nahor was, but he certainly wasn't our God. Benenu Elohei Avihem v'yishava Yaakov b'fachad aviv Yitzchak. And Yaakov swore by the fear of his father, Yitzchak, meaning our God. Verse 54, Vayizbach Yaakov zevach bahar. So Yaakov sacrificed or brought an offering on the mountain. Vayikra le'echav. I don't know who these echav are of Yaakov. He called to his brothers. I'm not sure who they're talking about here because Yaakov. Yeah, I mean, that means kin, but he didn't have any kin around there, I don't think, unless it's speaking about maybe some other people from the house of from Haran. I don't know who these brothers are, but it's mentioned it now number of times. Lechol lechem, to eat bread or food. V'yochlu lechem v'yalinu bahar, and they ate together. So again, this is one of the signs of solidifying, of closing solidifying or officiating making official a covenant, a brit. V'yalinu bahar, and they slept on the mountain. Yeah. Verse 55, Yashkem Lavan Baboker, and Lavan woke up in the morning, Yenashek Levanav Levanotav. He kissed his sons and his daughters. Again, proof that when it says Banim or Ben, it doesn't mean direct sons, because here it's clearly speaking about his grandkids, right? Levanotav, and there it's probably speaking about first and foremost about Rachel and Leah, but also we know it says that Dinah was already born. So probably that includes Dinah. And he blessed them. And he went and Lavan returned to his place, and that's the end of Lavan. We never hear about Lavan again, except when we bring the Bikurim and we have to say Arami Oved Davi. Right? Yaakov halach ledarko. So already, wait a second, are we? No, this is already the end of, that's it. That's the end of the Parsha, right?
Okay. Another thing that I found interesting was before Lavan caught up with Yaakov, God visited him in a dream and spoke to him, a non-Jew. A non-Hebrew.
Happens many times. God also spoke to Avi Melech in a dream and warned him away from messing with Sarah. Right. Mm-hmm. Or was it Rivka? I always get the thing happen again. There was one time where he spoke to him in a dream, and there was another time where he just realized it on his own. I think it was it was in the case of Rivka that it came to him in a dream, because in the case of Sarah, Avi Melech sees Sarah and Yaakov and Abraham, in a way that only a husband and a wife would. So yeah, I mean, and in both cases, it's both the same thing. Lay off, don't you dare don't touch Sarah, because don't touch Abraham because he's a prophet. That's what God says to Avimelech, the king of Gerar.
Melech, it reminds me of one time that I had a dream that was somewhat prophetic. Because I had a dream that Israel was under attack and the rockets were coming from the west. And it was like impossible. At the time, it was long before Oslo and long before there was a Gaza. And it was like impossible to imagine that Israel would be under attack with rockets coming from the west. And that's exactly what happened years later.
When did it happen from the west?
When Gaza shot rockets.
But isn't that to the north?
No, they shot rockets from Gaza.
Yeah, but that's north.
Toward Jerusalem.
Okay, I guess it curves down there. Okay, I guess it's kind of the west. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, it was something that at the time would have been unimaginable. It was unimaginable.
I hear
and
you.
It bothered me. And I kind of forgot the dream until now that we're talking about dreams.
I hear you. All right. Do you want to finish off very quickly by reading a little bit of this Robert Abrams about those verses? Because he's really good. I like to read his stuff. So we're starting in verse, what was it? 45, was it? Where they first talk about the Brit? 43. We'll start in 43. So verse 43, the daughters of my daughters. Laban, oh shoot, I did it again. Touch this thing by mistake. Wait 1 second. What's going on here? 1 second. Sorry. Sorry. It's 30. Wait a second. Oh, I don't have it set up. Wait, there we go. So we're in 31. Chapter 31. Okay, 31. 43. Okay, the daughters are my daughters. Laban begins his response by refusing to yield an inch in point, of legal prerogative, but he concedes that there is nothing he can do about his daughters and all his grandsons on the face of it because of their evident attachment to Jacob, and perhaps because he fears to use the force he possesses against Jacob after the divine warning in the night vision. Verse 45, Jacob took a stone. So, shoot. 1 second. Okay. Jacob took a stone. Invited to make a pact, Jacob immediately resorts to the language of stones, as after the Bethel epiphany and in his first encounter with Rachel at the well. So this is the theme. So this Robert Alter claims, I think he's quoting another modern commentator, that there's a theme with Yaakov and stones, right? He rolls the stone away for Rachel. He puts stones under his head. And then he takes one of the stones and turns it into a matzevah at Bethel, etc. Thus, in sequence, the stones are associated with religious experience, personal experience, and now politics. Okay. Here, there is a doubling in the use of stones. A large stone is a commemorative pillar and border marker, and a pile of smaller stones is a commemorative mound, as we mentioned. Igar Sahaduta, so that's the Aramaic that Lavan called this setup. This contraption, this what's the word? I can't think of the word. This little setup over here. And Gal-Ed, the international character of the transaction, is nicely caught in Laban, the Aramaean's use of an Aramaic term, while Jacob uses Hebrew. Both names mean mound of witness. So there you go. So Robert Alter says both names mean mound of witness. That's what we were speaking about before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Igar Sahaduta and Gal-Ed. Verse 49, this is in Mitzpah. This is an alternative name for the height of Gilad. The meaning is lookout point, as Lavan's next words make etymologically clear. Okay? So Gilad is an area that's mentioned many times later, right? Like Eliyahu HaGiladi. Gilad. Verse 51 to 52, look this mound and look this pillar, witness be the mound and witness be the pillar. The studied repetitions and rhetorical flourishes that characterize Lavan's speech throughout reflect its function as a performative speech act stipulating the binding terms of the treaty. I will not cross over to you past this pillar. At this point, the story of bitter familiar struggle is also made an etiology, which I have no idea what that means. I've heard of it, but I don't know what it means. What is an etiology? Etiology is cause, instead of cause, oh, right, etiological. A manner of causation of a disease or condition. Okay. Is made an etiology for political history. What Lavan is designating here is clearly an international border. All right, whatever. The gods of their fathers, the words with the pronoun referent, they could not be part of Lavan's dialogue, and so must be a gloss, perhaps occasioned by the discomfort of a scribe or editor with the exact grammatical equation between the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor in Lavan's oath. Interesting, but I disagree with that statement. I'm not going to get into it now. Jacob swore by the terror of his father Isaac, the denomination of the deity, which occurs only in this episode. Really? I thought there were other places. It's strange enough to have prompted some biblical scholars to argue unconvincingly that the name has nothing to do with terror or fear. What is noteworthy is that Jacob resists the universal Semitic term for God, Elohim, and the equation between the gods of Nahor and Avraham. He himself does not presume to go back as far as Avraham, but in the God of his father Isaac, he senses something numinous, awesome, frightening. Offered sacrifice, ate bread. Verse 54, the treaty vow is solemnly confirmed by a sacred meal. The term zevach, actually, in Hebrew, refers both to a ceremonial meal of meat and to sacrifice. In effect, the two are combined. The fat of the animal is burned as an offering. The meat is consumed by those who offer the sacrifice. Is frequently
Elsewhere in biblical usage, bread is a sine doce home meal, and I have no idea what a sine doce is, but I'm about to find out. I get it from the context, but I've never heard. These academics, they use all these.
It sounds Portuguese.
It could. Doce is maybe sweet. A figure of speech. England lost by 6 wickets, meaning the English cricket team. A figure of speech in which a part is made to represent the whole or vice versa. Oh, okay. So bread represents the whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's some examples of sine doces. Let's see. When a part of something, do you like my new wheels? Oh, okay. That's a great example. Do you like my new car? Cool. All right. Well, I think we'll end it.
Okay. Nice spending time with you.
Yeah, excellent. Really, really, really nice, interesting study. We'll do it again next week. Be'ezrat Hashem. And if you can make it, that would be great. And yeah. So
good.
Okay. Excellent. So all right.
Bye-bye.
So I'm going to put some music on to go out.
Okay.
All right. One second.
Alta, alta es la luna cuando empieza a esclarecer. Ella hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Ella hermosa y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Mis ojos se hincharon de tanto mirar la mar. Vapóricos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay. Vapóricos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay. Hermoso, 2 taras tiene con él, la una que arrollada dos, la otra que echa sheshpesh, la una que arrollada dos, la otra que echa sheshpesh. Mi querido es alto y vano y una vara de expander. Mi madre hizo colada, lo metió a